Chapter 1022. At first, Xie Shangzhou was still able to find an excuse to brush it off. But as the number of times increased, Lin Jie gradually noticed something amiss with him, and she started asking him what was wrong. His mood seemed to be a little off lately. Did something happen? Xie Shangzhou was really afraid that he would expose himself before Lin Jie, so he could only find a suitable opportunity to apply for a business trip and leave Lin Jie for a short period of time. By the time he finished his work and returned to Beijing, it was already early August. He arrived at the airport at noon. He had work to do in the afternoon, so he didn't even go home and directly took a taxi to the company. Lin Jie was supposed to meet a client in the afternoon, and upon seeing that he had returned, she had him accompany her to meet the client in the company. However, the client this time around was a little difficult to deal with. By the time they sent the client away, the sunny skies had already darkened. Lin Jie didn't have any plans that night, and Xie Shangzhou had just returned from a business trip. So, after they were done with their work, Lin Jie asked Xie Shangzhou if he was busy. After Xie Shangzhou replied that he was free, Lin Jie suggested having a meal together. Xie Shangzhou did not refuse. Lin Jie didn't want to wear her work attire for dinner, so she had Xie Shangzhou wait for her while she headed to the resting room in the office to change her clothes. While Lin Jie was changing her clothes, Xie Shangzhou received a call from the front desk. There was an express mail for Lin Jie. Since there was nothing much to do, Xie Shangzhou headed over to the front desk to retrieve the package for Lin Jie. By the time Zhang Xian returned to Lin Jie's office, Lin Jie had just finished changing her clothes and was walking out of the resting room. Express delivery. Xie Shangzhou placed a large box on the table. Curious as to what was inside the box, Lin Jie had Xie Shangzhou wait for a moment before taking out the delivery knife from the drawer. Before Lin Jie could open the package, Xie Shangzhou suddenly recalled how she had cut herself with the delivery knife, so he spoke up first. "Let me help you open it." Lin Jie passed the delivery knife over to Xie Shangzhou. Soon, the package was unpacked. Xie Shangzhou stood by the side with the delivery knife in hand, making way for Lin Jie so that she could open the package herself. The last gift to be opened was a bag. The latest Chanel collection. It had just gone on sale yesterday, and Lin Jie had even posted a picture of it on her Moments. That's strange. I haven't ordered this bag yet. Who gave it to me? Lin Jie asked doubtfully as she grabbed her bag. Following which, her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and immediately put on a smile. She turned to look at Xie Shangzhou. "Navigator, wait for me for a while." After Xie Shangzhou nodded, Lin Jie swiped her finger across the screen and answered the call. "Hello, Enchanting." Hearing this name, Xie Shangzhou lowered his head and took out his phone. "Ha! How did you know I received a package?" "Oh, no, this bag is from you." "I like it, of course I like it." "What are you doing?" "What?" "In a taxi." "Why are there foreigners talking next to you?" "Where are you?" Shortly after Lin Jie said those words, Xie Shangzhou watched as she hung up the call. A moment later, she received another call from her phone. She picked it up, and it turned into a video call. Lin Jie was looking at her phone screen, so the call was put on speakerphone. Chapter 1023. Lin Jie didn't say a word. Instead, she stared at her phone intently. Enchanting spoke up once more, "Can't you tell?" A second after he said those words, Lin Jie's eyes widened in realization. "Isn't this near the university?" "Enchanting, you're in America. And you even went to the university." "Enchanting, that's right." "Lin Jie, why did you suddenly go to America?" Enchanting didn't say a word. The image on Lin Jie's phone kept changing, and a moment later, it finally stopped at a certain spot. You told me that we first met here, and here, you said that our first date was here, and we even performed Romeo and Juliet in that auditorium. You were the one who told me all of this. We shared so many beautiful memories, but I can't remember any of them anymore. I don't know if I'll ever have the chance to remember them in this lifetime, but I still want to visit all the places where we shared our beautiful memories. Hearing Enchanting's words, Xie Shangzhou raised his head to look at Lin Jie. The young lady was staring at her phone screen with a visibly moved expression. Jie, I'm sorry that I can't remember you anymore, and I'm also sorry that no matter how hard I try, I can't find my lost memories. But Jie, it took me a lot of effort to find this. As Enchanting said those words, Xie Shangzhou could clearly see a silver ring appearing on Lin Jie's phone screen. Lin Jie also had a silver ring, and it was a pair with this one. Jie, there's something that I've been wanting to say since the last time we met. Jie, can we return to those beautiful stories that you told me? Can we be like the us in the stories you told us? Can we be happy together? Xie Shangzhou tightened his grip on his phone. He stared at Lin Jie intently, and he could clearly see tears of gratitude glistening in her eyes. He could also clearly see her lips moving, and he could even hear her saying, "Sure, sure." Sure, she had only said it once, but it echoed in his ears countless times. When she came back to her senses, he had already left her office and was standing at his desk in a daze. He tried very hard to remember how he left her office, but he couldn't remember anything. All he felt was a faint pain in his leg. He reached out to rub it, and then he slowly remembered that after he walked out of her office, he seemed to have bumped into something, but he couldn't remember what exactly he bumped into. Xie Shangzhou stood dumbfounded on the spot for a moment longer before his gaze fell on a large bag placed by his desk. He stared at the bag for a long while before he took a few steps forward. Reaching out, he picked up the bag and carefully took out the box inside. Opening the packaging, he saw a bag identical to the one Lin Jie had just opened. It was always like this. Every time he saw her post something she liked, he would buy it. He knew that if he bought it, it would be the same as the bag this time, and he would not be able to give it away, but he still bought it stubbornly. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't want to give it to her, but he didn't have the qualifications and reason to give it to her. He liked her, and that was all he liked, secretly. Chapter 1024. Navigator. Navigator. Lin Jie's voice suddenly sounded behind him, and Xie Shangzhou abruptly reined in his thoughts. Little navigator. Little Xie Shangzhou. Little. I'm only 2 years younger than her. Is there a need for her to use the word little every single time? As Xie Shangzhou grumbled in his mind, he subconsciously tried to turn around, but before he could make a move, he suddenly heard Lin Jie's footsteps behind him. Seeing the bag in front of him, Xie Shangzhou hurriedly placed it back into the box before stuffing it back into the bag in a fluster. But no matter how fast he reacted, Lin Jie still managed to catch a glimpse of the label on the box. HM. A Chanel box. Is it a bag or a pair of shoes? Perhaps it was due to his guilty conscience, Xie Shangzhou instinctively lied, a pair of shoes. Oh. That box doesn't look too big, so it should be a pair of women's shoes. As she spoke, Lin Jie looked at Xie Shangzhou with an expression as if she had just discovered a story. Who is it for? Do you have a girlfriend? Why didn't you tell me so that I could give you a raise? After all, dating is a very costly affair. Even though he knew that it was impossible for the two of them to be together, he still didn't want her to misunderstand him. Xie Shangzhou reflexively refuted the notion. No, I don't have a girlfriend. Right after saying those words, he realized that he had overreacted, so he quickly added. It's for my younger sister. She wants it, I see. Lin Jie didn't doubt his words. On the way out of the company with Xie Shangzhou, Lin Jie asked, "Is your younger sister about to give birth to her second child?" "The last time she came to Beijing, I met her once when you drove my car around with her. She told me that she's pregnant with her second child, so it should be about time now, right?" She gave birth last Friday, that's perfect. Tell me when you send the pair of shoes to your younger sister. I'll prepare a gift for her, and you can send it back together. Isn't that a little inappropriate?" "Boss Lin. What's inappropriate about it?" "If I say it's appropriate, then it's appropriate." As Lin Jie spoke, she raised her chin toward the car in front, gesturing for Xie Shangzhou to stop. "Close. Close. You have to twist." While they were having dinner, Lin Jie received another call from Enchanting. From the content of their conversation, Xie Shangzhou could tell that Enchanting had come to Beijing for Lin Jie and was looking for a job. Lin Jie didn't chat too long with Enchanting before hanging up. Xie Shangzhou poured a bowl of soup for Lin Jie, and as Lin Jie picked up the bowl and slowly sipped on it, he asked, "Is Mr. Qin coming to Beijing?" "Yeah, he came straight here after he came back from America. I felt bad that he gave up his previous job and came to Beijing. I mentioned letting him join the Lin Corporation, but he rejected me. He said he wanted to develop his own career. I thought about it, maybe every man wants to preserve his dignity, so I let him be. Looks like I have to congratulate you in advance, Boss Lin. The good news is coming." Chapter 1025. Before Xie Shangzhou could say anything, Lin Jie had already glared at him and said, "You're not allowed to reject me. If you do, I'll deduct your salary." Xie Shangzhou's rejection was swallowed back down by Lin Jie. He was silent for a moment before replying, "Fine." Having received a satisfactory answer, Lin Jie smiled. Seeing her smile, Xie Shangzhou's mood lightened up as well. "Forget it, since she likes to introduce girlfriends to me, I'll just let her be. In any case, she's been my matchmaker over the years, so it's all up to me whether she succeeds or not." By the time Lu Benlai arrived at Leng Wan's apartment, the lights were already dimmed. He took a look at the time and saw that it was already 10 o'clock. Since Coco had to go to kindergarten tomorrow morning and Leng Wan had to go to work, they should be asleep by now. He didn't go upstairs to press the doorbell and wake them up. Instead, he sat quietly in the car and waited. His cold hadn't recovered yet, so he waited until the latter half of the night. His head was throbbing with pain, so he leaned against the back of the car and closed his eyes for a moment. However, he didn't dare to really fall asleep, fearing that he would miss them if he slept too late. By 6 o'clock in the morning, Lu Benlai had already woken up. The elderly in the neighborhood were already out for their morning exercises. When it was nearing 7 o'clock, a large car drove into the neighborhood and stopped in front of Leng Wan's apartment. The truck had the sign "Moving Company" spray-painted on it. Moving Company. Who would be moving so early in the morning? Could it be? He recognized Coco's voice when she called him last night, so naturally, she knew that he recognized her as well. For someone to be moving here today. Could it be? As this thought flashed across Lu Benlai's mind, he quickly got out of the car and stopped a middle-aged man who was getting out of the moving car. "Who's moving?" "It's the tenant on the 15th floor of this building, the 15th floor. Isn't that the floor where Leng Wan lives?" Could it be that he had really guessed correctly? With such thoughts in mind, Lu Benlai hurriedly thanked the person he asked before rushing into the building. Upon reaching the 15th floor and stepping out of the elevator, Lu Benlai immediately saw Leng Wan's apartment. The door was open, and she was standing at the entrance, chatting with a worker from the moving company who was already upstairs. Through the open door, Lu Benlai could see the furnishings in Leng Wan's house. It was completely different from the last time he was here. There were several packed cardboard boxes in the house, and there was no sign of the warmth that he had seen the last time he brought Cuckoo over. Other than the auntie standing at the door, Lu didn't see Lang Nguyen and Coco either. Thus, he quickly walked over and asked, "Where are Nguyen Lang Nguyen Ko?" The auntie still remembered Lu Benlai, and she was delighted to see him. "Aren't you the gentleman who sent Nan Nan back the other day?" Lu Lang. Lu Benlai asked again, "Where are Lang Nguyen and Kiki?" "Last night, for some reason, they wanted me to pack my things overnight. They said they wanted to move as soon as possible. As for them, they went to the hotel last night. Have you contacted the new homes you're going to live in?" Chapter 10:26. Thus, when he saw the moving company, his guess was right. Knowing that her whereabouts had been discovered by him, what she had to do was to hide quietly, just like she did 4 years ago. Lu Benlai glanced around the room before turning to look at the moving company standing by the side. After a moment of contemplation, he turned to the auntie of Lang Nguyen's house and said, "How about this? Don't ask them to move yet. Put the things that you've arranged back where they were." But, knowing what she was going to say, Lu Benlai spoke up once more, "Just do as I say. I'll talk to Nguyen Nguyen about it." Lu Benlai raised his wrist to take a look at the time. Kiki and Little Snack were in the same kindergarten, and they were supposed to enter the kindergarten at 8. It was only 7 now, so Lang Nguyen probably hadn't sent Kiki to the kindergarten yet. With this thought in mind, Lu Benlai said to the auntie, "I'll wait for her at the kindergarten now. Just do as I say." "Don't worry, I'll try to persuade her." The auntie pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. "But we're already here." Overhearing the conversation between Lu Benlai and the auntie, the staff couldn't help but interject. "Don't worry, I won't let you make a wasted trip, and I won't let your time go to waste either. I'll pay you." As he spoke, Lu Benlai took out his wallet and took out a stack of red notes. He passed it to the staff and said, "Count it and see if this is enough." After taking the money, the staff counted the amount he wanted before passing the rest back to Lu Benlai. "This is enough." Lu Benlai took out another 2 notes and passed them back to the staff. "Take this money as my treat." "I'm really sorry." It's fine. The staff felt a little embarrassed by Lu Benlai's antics. He waved his hands and refused to accept Lu Benlai's money. Instead, he said, "Since there's no need for us to move, we'll be leaving now." After receiving a nod from the auntie, he quickly turned around and entered the elevator. After the staff left, Lu Benlai quickly followed suit. Lang Nguyen's place wasn't too far away from the kindergarten. Lu Benlai took a look at the traffic, and seeing that it was relatively smooth, he didn't take the subway. Instead, he drove straight to the kindergarten. When he arrived at the entrance of the kindergarten, it was just 7:20. After parking the car, he first went to the entrance of the kindergarten to ask if Ling Kiki had arrived. After knowing that she hadn't arrived yet, he stood at the entrance of the kindergarten and waited. After staying in the car for an entire night, Lu Benlai's cold had worsened significantly. It didn't take long for him to stand at the entrance of the kindergarten before his head felt incredibly heavy. Lu Benlai tried his best to maintain his composure, but time seemed to drag on endlessly. Lu Benlai glanced at his watch from time to time, and as time ticked by, he grew more and more nervous. When it was nearing 7:40 p.m., more and more parents were appearing at the entrance of the kindergarten to send their children off. Afraid that he might miss something, Lu Benlai glanced around frantically. At 7:46 p.m., a taxi stopped by the roadside. Roughly a minute later, the door was pushed open, and Lu Benlai saw a pair of white high heels sticking out from within. With just a quick glance, Lu Benlai's entire body froze. His eyes were fixated on the pair of high heels, and it wasn't until she got off the car that his gaze slowly moved up the heels. When his gaze finally fell on her face, his eyes suddenly felt a stinging sensation in them. They had parted so suddenly that they didn't even have a chance to say goodbye. But now, they were finally going to meet again. Chapter 10:27. Lang Wan didn't notice Lu Benlai. Instead, she carried Kiki toward the entrance of the kindergarten while talking to her. The one who noticed Lu Benlai was Kiki. Kiki had been obediently hugging Lang Wan's neck while listening to her speak, but for some reason, Kiki suddenly started calling for her daddy. Following which, Kiki released Lang Wan's neck and stretched her arms forward. "Kiki, if you continue like this, Mommy will throw you." Before Lang Wan could finish her words, she caught sight of a familiar figure standing right in front of her from the corner of her eye. As if someone had sealed her acupoints, she froze on the spot. She subconsciously tightened her grip around Kiki. Kiki cried out in pain, "Mommy, it hurts, Mommy." Lang Wan snapped out of her daze, but she continued staring at the figure before her for a moment before realizing what Kiki had said. She quickly retracted her grip. Kiki, who was no longer in pain, squirmed in Lang Wan's embrace before spreading her arms toward Lu Benlai once more. Daddy hug, Lu Benlai, who had been in a daze ever since he saw Lang Wan, finally regained his senses. He subconsciously reached out toward Kiki, but before his fingers could touch her, Lang Wan had already circled around him with Kiki in her arms. "Kiki, we're going to be late soon. Mommy will send you to school." "I don't want school, I want Daddy." Kiki cried out. Seeing that Lu Benlai was getting further and further away from her, her eyes reddened. "Mommy is naughty, I want Daddy. Kiki, if you continue to be so disobedient, Mommy will get angry." Lang Wan rarely spoke to her daughter in such a strict manner, and it frightened Kiki. Kiki didn't dare to cry out anymore, but large droplets of tears still flowed down her cheeks. Lang Wan's heart ached for Kiki, but she didn't coax Kiki. Instead, she hastened her footsteps to the entrance of the kindergarten and passed Kiki to the kindergarten teacher. It was only after the aggrieved Kiki was taken away by the teacher that Lang Wan closed her eyes and took a deep breath to adjust her emotions. Then, she turned around to look at Lu Benlai, who was standing not too far behind her. Neither of them moved. They stared at one another for a moment before Lu Benlai lifted his leg and walked forward. When he was standing right before Lang Wan, he said, "Nuan." It's been a long time." Lang Wan's emotions, which she had just managed to calm down with much difficulty, were instantly thrown into disarray. She mustered all of her strength to calm herself down, and after half a minute of silence, she finally managed to maintain a calm tone and said, "Long time no see, Mr. Lu." Lu Benlai Wan. He never knew that the term of address that he heard many times a day actually had another meaning: "I have nothing to do with you anymore." Seeing that Lu Benlai wasn't saying a word, Lang Wan spoke up once more, "If there's nothing else, Mr. Lu, I'll be taking my leave." Lin Wan. Lu Wan ki hard, Lin Lu long ko Lu Wan Lin, Wan. Lu. Chong, ku. Lin, ku, he, peng, shao kia ku, he, I, he Chong, Lin. Chapter 10:28. Lang Wan didn't say a word. Lu Benlai knew that Lang Wan didn't want to talk to him. To be more precise, she didn't want to have anything to do with him at all. If he hadn't coincidentally bumped into Kiki and sent her home, he probably wouldn't have met her today. Without waiting for Lang Wan to speak, Lu Benlai spoke up once more, "There are so many people here, so it's not that convenient. If you don't mind, why don't you sit in my car?" As soon as Lu Benlai said those words, someone walked past them with a child. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that something was amiss with the atmosphere between the two of them, so the passers-by couldn't help but glance at them several times. Noticing this, Lang Wan nodded her head in agreement. Lu Benlai pointed to the spot where his car was parked and said, "The car is over there." Without saying a word, Ling Wan grabbed her bag and followed Lu Benlai to the side of the road. When they arrived at the car, Lu Benlai reached out to help Ling Wan open the door to the front passenger seat, but Ling Wan reached out to open the back door and entered the car. Lu Benlai stood on the spot for a moment before bending over and getting into the car himself. After closing the car door, Lu Benlai turned to look at Ling Wan. "Nguan Nguan, how have you been all these years?" Before he could finish his words, Ling Wan, who was sitting at the back of the car, spoke up calmly. Her expression was just like the first time he met her in school, filled with rejection and alienation. "I have to work at 9, and it's almost 8 now. It's a half-hour drive from here to my office, so Mr. Lu, you only have 20 minutes at most to talk to me." Of course, Lu Benlai knew what Ling Wan was trying to say. She was telling him to get straight to the point. It hadn't been easy for them to go from her ignoring him to the point where they could talk about everything. But now, they were back to square one again. Lu Benlai gulped down a mouthful of saliva. "Kiki is my child, right?" "Yes." Ling Wan didn't try to hide anything. "But don't worry, she won't affect your future marriage and children." "Nguan Nguan, you know that's not what I meant. That's why I'm asking you, Mr. Lu, I don't care what you're trying to say. You should know that I'm not interested." The interior of the car fell silent. He had been looking forward to meeting her every day, but after they actually met, he realized that everything was far worse than he had imagined. She had not returned to the starting point when they first met. She was now far more repulsive towards him than she had been back then. For a moment, Lu Benlai didn't know what to say. Chapter 1029. Ling Wan paused for a moment. She feigned a calm demeanor and spat out everything she wanted to say. "I don't want to have anything to do with you in the future, even if it's your child. So, I hope that our meeting today is both the beginning and the end." After expressing her intentions clearly, Ling Wan pondered for a moment, and after confirming that she had nothing else to add, she continued, "Mr. Lu, is there anything else? If not, I'll go to work now." But before she could finish her words, Lu Benlai had already spoken up. "I'm sorry." Ling Wan's voice suddenly fell silent. Her fingers subconsciously tightened their grip on her bag. After a moment of silence, Lu Benlai's voice sounded once more. "I'm sorry, Nguan Nguan. I was in the wrong back then. I didn't pay attention to my phone. I didn't know that you had called me 100 times. If I had known, I would have never done that." Ling Wan felt her nose sting up. She turned her head away and looked out the window. "I'm sorry." Does he know that the word sorry can be the most hurtful thing to a person in love? He said that he didn't pay attention to his phone and didn't know that she had called him 100 times. He was saying it so casually now, but did he know how she had endured every single night for that 1 month 4 years ago? He was the person she had mustered all of her courage to accept back then. But in the end, he said that he wouldn't care about her anymore. He didn't reply to her messages, didn't pick up her calls, and even when she went to look for him, he refused to see her. He would never know what kind of emotions she had gone through back then. So, what was the point of him apologizing to her now? "Nguan Nguan, I'm sorry. I know that nothing I say will change your mind, but I didn't really mean it back then. I thought that you didn't like me. In any case, I was the one who did the wrong thing back then. After you left, I've been waiting for you, and I've been looking for you all this time. All these years, I've never had a girlfriend, and I never thought of getting married. I've been waiting for you all this time. Now that you're back, can you reconsider me? Can we go back to how we were before?" Ling Wan stared out the window impassively, as if Lu Benlai's words weren't directed at her. She waited for Lu Benlai to finish his words before asking, "Is that all you wanted to talk to me about?" Lu Benlai was taken aback by Leng Wan's question. 3 seconds later, he finally nodded. I don't want to go back to the past. I'm living a good life now. I don't want to change the current situation. To be exact, she was afraid. She was afraid that she would muster up the courage to change the current situation like she did in the past and end up leaving with a sad ending. Chapter 10:30. So, Lingwan took a deep breath before continuing, so, I hope that our conversation this time will have cleared up everything. Alright, I've already said what I wanted to say, and you should have said what you wanted to say as well, right? Anyway, it's about time for me to head to work. Without waiting for Lu Benlai's response, Lingwan pushed open the car door. Just as she was about to get out of the car, Lu Benlai turned around and shouted, Nguan Nguan, but I still like you a lot. Lingwan didn't say a word, but her fingers, which were holding onto her bag, were trembling intensely. She pretended not to hear Lu Benlai's words and got out of the car in an orderly manner. A second after she steadied herself on the ground, he spoke once more, Nguan Nguan. Afraid that he would say something that would disturb her emotions, Lingwan instinctively reached out to close the car door. But before she could do so, his words had already traveled into her ears, don't move anymore. Lingwan didn't expect that he would say such a thing. She was taken aback as she stared at him in disbelief. However, he didn't look at her. Instead, his head was lowered as he stared at his fingertips. It was hard to tell what he was thinking about. After a moment, he continued, you said that it's not easy taking care of Kiki. You can't just move and change jobs whenever you want, so don't move anymore. I came over from your house this morning, and I've already told your auntie to pack up the things back to their original state. I've also sent the movers away. Didn't you move because I found out your address and you were afraid that I would pester you? You really don't have to hide from me like this. If you don't want me to disturb your life, I won't disturb you either. I'll listen to whatever you want. If you want to maintain the status quo, I promise that I won't do anything to you. Lastly, even though you might not need it, I still want to say that I still have my old phone number, and you should know my current work number as well. If you and Kiki run into any trouble, feel free to look for me. Lingwan wasn't sure whether Lu Benlai had finished his words or not, so she abruptly raised her hand and slammed the car door shut. Without hesitation, she grabbed her bag tightly, turned around, and hurriedly walked to the side of the road, flagged a taxi, and left. A long while after she left, Lu Benlai finally turned around to look at the rearview mirror. She was nowhere to be found, but he still stared at the rearview mirror in a daze. To be honest, it was already a joyous occasion for him to be able to meet her again. Even if she wasn't willing to accept him for the time being, it didn't matter. He could just wait patiently. Just as Shiryao had told him, he should tolerate her a little more and bear with her a little more. With such thoughts in mind, Lu Benlai couldn't help but fall into a daze. 4 years ago. If he had known how to love more 4 years ago, then he would have been more tolerant and patient with her. Would they have had a different ending then? Chapter 1031. The afternoon sun was exceptionally radiant. Lin Jiayi and Xia Sui had agreed to meet at the stud farm at 3 in the afternoon, but before 1, Lin Jiayi had already dragged Xia Shangzhou out of the company and headed to the shopping mall next door. However, this time, Lin Jiayi wasn't there to buy anything for herself. Instead, she headed to the men's sports area and picked out a set of clothes for Xia Shangzhou. Meaning to date a horseshoe gorge. 2. Polypus. Sucking oxym from its mouth. Pine. On the way down to the elevator, Lin Jiayi would occasionally glance at Xia Shangzhou, who was standing beside her and had been dressed up again. She looked at him as if she was looking at her own child, and the more she looked at him, the more satisfied she became. In the end, she couldn't help but praise Xia Shangzhou, little navigator, I didn't think that you'd still look so handsome after some effort. You should buy some fashionable clothes in the future and dress yourself up more while you're still young. Don't always wear a white shirt or a black suit, it's so monotonous. Also, take off those black-rimmed glasses of yours. Don't wear them anymore. Let me tell you, I'm not trying to brag, but have you ever been through my hands? Have you ever tried to bully me? Sakura. Have you ever tried to mash me? How can I be blind? As Lin Jiayi spoke, she reached out to tidy up Xie Shangzhou's hair. Her fingertips inadvertently brushed against his forehead. The soft touch made Xie Shangzhou's back subconsciously tense up. Lin Jiayi didn't notice anything amiss with him. After she was done with his hairstyle, she took 2 steps back and assessed him carefully. After making sure that there was nothing wrong with him, she said with a smile, "Little navigator, I'll take a photo of you at the stud farm later, so you can change your profile picture." Hearing her calling him little navigator, Xie Shangzhou couldn't help but reply, "Boss Lin, can you remove the word little?" "I can't. I'm only 2 years younger than you. I'm not 20. 2 years younger is still a little. Little brother, listen to me obediently and don't resist me. If I'm happy, I'll buy you candies, Xie Shangzhou." "Forget it, I'll just call him Little Navigator, then." When they arrived at the stud farm, Xia Sui, whom Lin Jiayi had arranged to meet, hadn't arrived yet. She and Xie Shangzhou found a seat near the window in the lounge and sat facing each other while waiting. After about 10 minutes or so, Xia Sui arrived. Just as Lin Jiayi had described, Xia Sui was indeed a beautiful lady. Perhaps it was because she came from a family of scholars, but her actions and words were filled with a soothing disposition. Lin Jiayi's intention was to matchmake Xie Shangzhou and Xia Sui, so when Xia Sui arrived, she chatted with them for a while before leaving with the excuse that she needed to ride a horse. "I heard from Jiayi that you graduated from Ji University." "Yes. Your school is full of top students, so you're talking about the legendary top student." Xie Shangzhou smiled. "But it's quite a coincidence that we're both surnamed Xia." "Indeed, it sure is a coincidence." Xie Shangzhou seemed to be chatting casually with Xia Sui, but in truth, his eyes were constantly sneaking glances at Lin Jiayi. Dressed in a black riding attire, Lin Jiayi was riding on a white horse as she galloped around the field. When the horse ran faster, her face would be filled with a bright smile. Every time he saw this sight, Xie Shangzhou's lips would curl up as well. But not too long later, the white horse, which was still fine a second ago, suddenly became agitated. Upon seeing this sight, Xie Shangzhou immediately stood up and dashed out of the lounge, heading straight for Lin Jiayi. Just as Xie Shangzhou was about to reach Lin Jiayi, the white horse suddenly stood up and flung Lin Jiayi off its back. Without any hesitation, Xie Shangzhou rushed forward to catch Lin Jiayi. Due to the immense impact, Xie Shangzhou fell to the ground together with Lin Jiayi. Even though the series of events had happened too abruptly, Xie Shangzhou still managed to protect Lin Jiayi perfectly, using his body as a cushion to prevent her from being knocked down by the rocks on the ground. However, before she could digest the shock from the earlier encounter, the white steed suddenly stomped down on Lin Jiayi's back. Chapter 1032. Upon noticing the danger, the staff and Xia Sui rushed over, and upon seeing this sight, they immediately shouted, "Jiayi, be careful. Miss Lin, be careful." Almost as soon as they shouted, Xie Shangzhou, who was beneath Lin Jiayi, abruptly flipped around with her in his arms. Following which, the white steed that had suddenly gone berserk stomped down on Xie Shangzhou's back before galloping past him and Lin Jiayi to continue galloping forward. Taking in the entire scene, Xia Sui could clearly see that Xie Shangzhou's arms were placed on either side of Lin Jiayi's head instead of pressing down on her body and hugging her. In fact, when the white horse stomped down on his back, his body swayed violently, but he didn't allow himself to fall onto the ground. This was a small detail that no one else noticed, and even Lin Jie, the person in question, was oblivious to it. However, Xia Sui saw through Xia Shangzhou's thoughts with a single glance. The reason why he was behaving this way wasn't because it was inappropriate for a man and a woman to touch each other, but because he was afraid that he would injure her if the white horse stomped down on his back. He had intentionally used such a method to separate the horse and Lin Jie with his body. On the other hand, Xia Shangzhou's face was exceptionally pale. Perhaps it was due to the immense force exerted by the horse, but he endured the pain and stared at Lin Jie beneath him for a moment before he finally managed to force himself to ask, "Ms. Lin, are you all right?" Lin Jie shook her head, but before she could say a word, Xia Shangzhou had already fallen heavily on top of her, and there was no reaction from her. Xia Shangzhou was awoken by the pain. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in the hospital. His surroundings were extremely quiet, and when he looked out of the window, all he saw was darkness. "You're awake." Before Xia Shangzhou, who was lying on the bed, could react, he heard an elegant voice coming from behind him. He subconsciously tried to turn around, but the moment he moved, he immediately sucked in a deep breath of cold air in pain. "Your back is injured, so don't move around recklessly," it was that elegant voice again. Following which, a cup with a straw was passed over to him. "Have some water." Xia Shangzhou turned his head and glanced at the person who had walked up to him. As he accepted the cup of water, he politely thanked her. "Thank you, Miss Xia." Xia Sui curled her lips and looked at him thoughtfully without saying a word. Xia Shangzhou did not notice Xia Sui's strange behavior, nor did he drink the water. Instead, he asked, "Where's Chief Lin?" "Boss Lin. Jie isn't very well." Before Xia Sui could finish her sentence, the glass in Xia Shangzhou's hand fell to the ground. He supported his injured body and struggled to get up from the bed. What happened to her? How could she not be well? "Are you hurt anywhere?" Seeing his reaction, Xia Sui hurriedly reached out and pressed on his shoulder. "Calm down, I was just joking with you." "She's fine," she went. After some thought, Xia Sui changed her words. "She went to pick up Enchanting." "Oh." Xia Shangzhou withered like a frosted eggplant. He lay back on the bed and did not say another word. Xia Sui, who had seen all of Xia Shangzhou's reactions ever since he woke up, stared at Xia Shangzhou for a moment, and she suddenly burst into laughter. Xia Shangzhou turned to look at Xia Sui and asked, "What are you laughing at?" Chapter 1033. As if struck by lightning, Xia Shangzhou's body stiffened, and he collapsed onto the bed, completely motionless. "You like Jie?" Xia Sui spoke up once more, but this time, it wasn't a question like before. Instead, it was a confident tone. Recovering from his daze, Xia Shangzhou replied, "Miss Xia, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Mr. Xia, you can't be thinking that I'm spouting nonsense without any basis, right?" Xia Sui leaned against the wall and stared at Xia Shangzhou as she spoke slowly. "Did Jie tell you that I took psychoanalysis as an elective in university? I'm able to deduce the true thoughts of many people through the clues they leave behind. I even helped the police catch a fugitive once, and that incident was quite famous. Even to this day, the entire investigation process is still a case study in my university's law class." "Oh, right, Mr. Xia. I'm not telling you all of this to show off my abilities. I'm just telling you that I really do have concrete evidence," Xia Sui said with a smile. "Do you need me to analyze it for you?" Xia Shangzhou didn't say a word. Xia Sui continued, "Firstly, when Jie said that she went for a horse ride, leaving me alone with you, I already had my suspicions. Do you know why? It's because while we were chatting, you looked at Jie a total of 37 times. Of those 37 times, you were smiling 20 times, and Jai was very happy when you were smiling. Secondly, it's not that I'm trying to brag, but a woman like me isn't the kind of woman who can be neglected no matter where I go. Even though we were sitting face to face, you didn't pay any attention to me at all. There's only one reason for that: there's someone you care more about. Of course, what really proved my suspicions was when you rushed over to save Jai and shielded her with your body when the horse stepped on her back. Take note, I'm going to get to the main point here. You were shielding her, not hugging her. A normal person would definitely hug her to save someone, but you used your body to shield Jai from the horse and Jai. You were afraid that you would implicate her if the horse were to hurt you. To be honest, I already knew what was going on back then. Oh, pardon me, but I'm not the kind of person who likes to help others. The reason why I followed Jai to the hospital wasn't because I was interested in you, but because I wanted to prove whether my suspicions were right or not. Jai didn't go to fetch Enchanting. She went to buy you some food. The reason why I lied twice was to see your reaction. The first time, when I said that Jai wasn't well, your reaction was so strong that it exposed your inner thoughts. The second time, when I lied, I said that she went to fetch Enchanting, your anxiety turned into disappointment. So, Mr. Xia, I'm certain that you like Jai. If I'm not mistaken, the reason why you're willing to meet me is because of Jai, right? Based on this, I can be certain that you like Jai, but Jai doesn't know that. When we were chatting in the afternoon, even though you didn't reveal much information to me, there's one thing that I'm certain of: you're a talented and capable student. There are probably quite a few people who want you to join them. The reason why you haven't left is also because of Jai, right? Am I right? Chapter 1034. Xia Sui's analysis was clear and logical, and every single one of her words pointed to the crux of the matter. She was brimming with confidence, but at the same time, she didn't give Xia Shangzhou a chance to back down. Xia Sui saw him opening and closing his mouth in annoyance, but no words came out. It was inexplicably cute, and she couldn't help but laugh. Then, she stared at Xia Shangzhou with even more curiosity and said, "Tell me, won't you? When did you fall in love with Jai? Aren't you prepared to share your story with the first person who knows your secret?" Xia Shangzhou, it was just a second ago that she was acting like an official, but in the next moment, she was acting cute. Are girls these days all so fickle? Xia Sui pondered for a moment before saying, "How about this? You tell me what I want to know, and I'll tell you a secret regarding Jai. Let's make a deal." I accidentally discovered this secret, and to this day, no one else knows about it. Even Jai herself doesn't know that I know about it. Xia Shangzhou's heart wavered a little. Xia Sui continued tempting him, "Do you really not want to know? That's Jai's dream." Xia Shangzhou's heart wavered. It's a few years ago. You're not being sincere. A few years ago is a few years ago. Xia Sui was dissatisfied with Xia Shangzhou's answer. Indeed, a few years ago is a few years ago. Was it the year Lin Jiej married Little Jr.? Wasn't it even earlier than that? Xia Shangzhou pondered for a moment before replying, 6 years ago. 6 years. My God, you actually liked Jai for 6 years, and you didn't reveal any flaws in it. I'm impressed. Xia Sui looked as if she had discovered a new continent, and her interest in Xia Shangzhou's love life deepened. How did you fall in love with Jai? How did I fall in love with her? Xia Shangzhou seemed to be stumped by the question. After a long moment of contemplation, he shook his head and said, "I don't know. I only know that I was afraid of her at the start. She had a fiery temper, and she was domineering. She would beat me up at the slightest disagreement. She would often make me work until the wee hours of the morning. Even in the middle of winter, I was already in bed. She would call me to buy supper for her, but she wouldn't eat it. Back then, I couldn't help but think that she was a terrifying woman. If all the women in the world were like her, I would rather die alone. Xia Sui, what happened after that? Chapter 1035. Xia Sui didn't interrupt Xia Shangzhou. Instead, she listened quietly to his words. Honestly speaking, she had seen far too many outstanding men in her life, but at this moment, she had to admit that Xia Shangzhou was truly charming. She treats the employees in the company very well. She is also very good to the employees in the company. She looks very domineering, but in fact, everyone likes her very much. Sun Ying's previous boyfriend cheated on her, and when he got married, he even sent her an invitation. When she found out about this, she was very angry, and lent her car to Sunning to drive, and even asked manager Zhang to accompany Sunning to attend her ex-boyfriend's wedding. She said, "This is how you treat a heartless man. Since he wants to see you make a fool of yourself, then let him know how good you are without him." Also, Zhang Heng's wife was in a car accident, and she's currently in the hospital. He wanted to get his salary in advance, but he couldn't break the rules. Lin Jia rejected him on the surface, but in private, she asked me to pay Zhang Heng and even hired the best doctor for him. She really has a lot of good things about her. Those are the things that move my heart, including her love for Qin Ting. He had seen how infatuated she was with Qin Ting all those years ago and how she never regretted her feelings for him. Seeing that Xia Shangzhou was done, Xia Sui asked, "Do you know that there are many people who are in love with Jie?" "I know. She's so outstanding that she deserves the love of so many people. But do you know that there's a high chance that nothing will come of you and Jie? Your one-sided love for her could very well lead to a meaningless ending." "I know. I've liked her from the very start, and I've never thought about anything. All I want is for her to be happy and happy. What about you? What about your happiness and happiness?" Xia Shangzhou fell silent. "If I'm not wrong, your monthly salary isn't that high, right? Your life in Beijing can't be considered wealthy, can it? With your capabilities, you should be able to attract quite a few headhunters, right? The reason why you're maintaining the status quo is because of Jie, right? Do you really think that it's worth it for you to give up love and money? Moreover, after she finds out about your feelings, have you ever thought that you might cause her psychological burden? In a relationship, there's no such thing as worth it or not, it's only whether you're willing or not. Furthermore, I don't want to achieve meteoric success and become rich enough to rival a country. I just want to live a peaceful life without worries. As for your last words, I know it might cause her trouble, so I never thought of letting her know. Therefore, I also hope that you can keep it a secret for me. I don't ask for too much, and I won't disturb her too much. What I want to do is to silently accompany her, so that she doesn't want to be alone forever. Let her be alone, never be alone." Xia Sui and Xia Shangzhou were chatting in the ward. Upon hearing those words, Lin Jia subconsciously tightened her grip on the takeaway in her hands. After buying dinner, she returned to the hospital. She was just about to push the door open and barge in when she heard Xia Sui's words through the door, "You like Jie." As if someone had sealed her acupoints, she suddenly froze at the door, unable to move in the slightest. "You like Jie. You are the navigator. Jie is Lin Jia. The navigator likes Lin Jia." Chapter 1036. Inside the ward, Xia Shangzhou and Xia Sui were still chatting, but Lin Jia wasn't listening to a single word. The only thing echoing in her ears was his words, "Leave her alone. She doesn't want to be alone ever again." Hearing those words, Lin Jia's heart was thrown into disarray. She had to calm herself down, so she took 2 steps back and silently took the elevator out of the building, as if she hadn't been there at all. Half an hour ago, there had just been a shower in Beijing, and the temperature had dropped significantly. The wind that blew against her face brought with it a refreshing coolness. Lin Jia stood in the wind for a moment, and the rising and falling of her chest gradually calmed down. Just as Xia Sui had said, she really had many admirers around her. While she couldn't be considered to have a discerning eye, she was still able to tell who was interested in her. Xia Shangzhou was the only exception. It had never crossed her mind that he was interested in her. She knew that he treated her very well. As long as he was around, she didn't even need to say anything about her habits and preferences, and he would arrange them for her. For example, she was afraid of the cold, so he would always prepare a blanket for her. Another example was that she liked to wear flats when no one was around. No matter where she was, as long as there were no outsiders around, she would always see a pair of flats. Another example was that she liked to eat sandwiches from an online restaurant, so she would see them on her desk at work every day. Another example was that her house was always a mess, so he would help her tidy it up every once in a while. Another example was that he seemed to have never stopped answering her calls, whether it was day or night, whether he was in the country or abroad. To be honest, there were times when she thought that he was overly meticulous and considerate, as if he was a robot. As long as she needed him, he would always appear, and as long as she asked, he would always answer. She had always thought that this was a tacit understanding they had developed through their work, but today, she realized that it wasn't the case. The reason why he was able to make his position as an assistant so impeccable wasn't because of tacit understanding but because he put in a lot of effort. He must have really put in a lot of effort to do everything that had to do with her perfectly, right? He must have really put in a lot of effort to hide his feelings so well that she couldn't see through it, right? Before hearing the conversation between Xia Sui and him, she didn't notice anything amiss. Now that she heard it, it was as if she had woken up from a dream. She realized that everything in the past was really heavy emotions. She really couldn't believe it. He was younger than her by 2 years, and he was classmates with her younger brother. In her eyes, she had always treated him as her younger brother. She had never thought of feelings for him, nor did she think that he would have feelings for her. The more Lin Jai thought about it, the more astonished she felt. The navigator had actually liked her for 6 years, but she had Qin Ting. His feelings were destined to be fruitless from the beginning. It would have been fine if she didn't know about these things, but now that she did. What was she going to do next? She couldn't possibly allow him to continue wasting his time by her side and pour out his feelings for her, right? Chapter 1037. But if he's unwilling, I'll have to make a swift and decisive move, just thinking about it. Lin Jiayi's heart suddenly throbbed with pain. It was a very light and fleeting sensation, but by the time she tried to feel it, the pain had already vanished without a trace. She thought that it was just her imagination, so she didn't pay it too much heed. After calming herself down, she returned to the hospital building and took the elevator back to the ward. This time, without any hesitation, she pushed the door open and entered. I'm back. As soon as she said those words, Xia Shangzhou and Xia Sui immediately shut their mouths. Lin Jai knew what was going on, but she feigned ignorance. She passed her coat to Xia Sui as she asked, "What are you two talking about? Why aren't you two talking as soon as I came in?" Xia Shangzhou lay on the bed guiltily, not saying a word. On the other hand, Xia Sui replied calmly, "Nothing much. We were just talking about his university life." Lin Jai replied with an "oh" as she scooped some of each dish into her small bowl. After which, she walked up to Xia Shangzhou and scooped a spoonful of rice into her spoon before bringing it to his mouth. Xia Shangzhou was overwhelmed by the favor. He shook his head and said, "Ms. Lin, I can do it myself," but before he could finish his words, Lin Jai had already shoved the spoonful of rice into his mouth. "I'm telling you to eat, so eat. Why are you spouting so much nonsense?" After saying those words, Lin Jai glared at Xia Shangzhou and said, "If a single grain of rice falls out of the rice I'm feeding you, I'll make sure that your chest is the same size as your back." This was the first time Xie Shangzhou had talked about his troubles with someone, so he couldn't help but feel a little guilty upon seeing Lin Jiayi's sudden return. However, seeing that she was no different from usual, he heaved a sigh of relief and obediently shut his mouth to eat. Lin Jiayi had never been a patient person, but she didn't urge Xie Shangzhou to hurry up and eat. It wasn't until he had swallowed all the food in his mouth that she exclaimed, as if feeding him a snack, before scooping another spoonful of rice and shoving it into his mouth. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed since Leng Yuan and Lu Benlai parted ways at the entrance of the kindergarten, and Leng Yuan hadn't seen Lu Benlai even once. Despite Lu Benlai's assurance, Leng Yuan still couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. She was afraid that things would get messy between them, so she decided to stay in the hotel with Kiki. But for the next 3 days, when she sent Kiki to kindergarten, she didn't see Lu Benlai at the entrance. It was only then that she gave up on the idea of moving and brought Kiki home. Days passed by one after another. Leng Yuan continued working from 9 to 5 as usual and took care of Kiki. On the other hand, it was as if Lu Benlai had never reunited with her, and there wasn't the slightest ripple in their lives. Ever since her reunion with Shi Yao, she had kept in close contact with them. She would often bring Kiki over to Shi Yao's place to play, and she had met Liang Jusi, Jiang Yu, Desolate Year, He Tian Tian, and even Lin Jiayi and Xie Shangzhou, who had just been discharged from the hospital. The only thing she hadn't met was Lu Benlai. It was only then that Leng Yuan finally believed Lu Benlai's words. Knowing that he wouldn't disturb her life, she finally heaved a sigh of relief. On the 27th day after her reunion with Lu Benlai, Leng Yuan worked late into the night. By the time she was done with her work, it was already 9 p.m. Chapter 1038. It was difficult to wait for a taxi, so by the time Leng Yuan returned to the entrance of the neighborhood, it was already 10:30. After paying the fare, Leng Yuan held onto her umbrella and hurriedly made her way to her apartment building. Just as she was about to reach the building, Leng Yuan noticed a car parked by the side. The car's headlights were still on. Did someone just get off work? Out of reflex, Leng Yuan shot a glance in the direction of the car. Through the dense rain, Leng Yuan couldn't help but feel that the car was extremely familiar. However, she didn't think too much about it. Instead, she glanced at the top of the car, and through the dripping windshield, she saw the person sitting in the driver's seat. Leng Yuan's footsteps subconsciously came to a halt. It's Lu Benlai. What is he doing downstairs in the middle of the night? Leng Yuan instinctively tightened her grip on her umbrella. Fortunately, Lu Benlai was busy on the phone, so he didn't notice her. It had been almost a month since they last met. In this month, he seemed to have lost a lot of weight, and he looked a little haggard. Is he busy with work recently? While Leng Yuan was deep in thought, she suddenly realized that she was overthinking things. So, she quickly retracted her gaze and pretended as if she hadn't seen anything. She walked into the building, closed her umbrella, pressed the elevator, and returned home. As it was too late, Kiki was already asleep. The auntie heard the commotion and walked out of her bedroom. Leng Yuan chatted with the auntie about Kiki before heading into her bedroom. Seeing the sleeping Kiki on the bed, Leng Yuan's gaze softened. She didn't stay for too long before grabbing her pajamas and towel and heading into the bathroom. After her shower, Leng Yuan took the warm milk from the auntie. After drinking half a cup, she seemed to have thought of something. She walked to the window and looked down. Lu Benlai's car was still there. It's already past 11. Why isn't he back yet? After finishing the milk, Leng Yuan saw that the car downstairs showed no signs of leaving, so she didn't move. When the auntie came out of the shower, she saw Leng Yuan staring blankly out of the window, so she walked over curiously. The auntie followed Leng Yuan's gaze and looked down. When she saw the car with its headlights on, she asked, "Is this car here tonight?" Hearing the auntie's voice, Leng Nuan glanced at her. Noticing that Leng Nuan was looking at her, the auntie knew that she was interested in the car, and she began to ramble on endlessly. "I remember this car. Of all the cars downstairs, this is the most expensive one. Around 20 days ago, I would wash Nanan's clothes at this time every day at this time and come to the balcony to dry them after my shower. Speaking of which, it's really weird. The lights of this car are always on, which means that there's someone inside. Who do you think it is? Why would they be sitting in the car in the middle of the night? Furthermore, there were several times when I woke up in the morning to bring Nanan's clothes over, and the lights were still on. That means that they have been sitting in the car for an entire night." As the auntie spoke, she craned her neck to take another look before turning to look at Leng Nuan. "Say, isn't it weird for the owner of the car to be able to afford a car like that? If he's able to afford a car like that, he must be able to afford a house as well. Why is he not at home at night but in the car?" Chapter 1039. Lying on the bed, Leng Nuan closed her eyes and prepared to sleep, but she didn't feel the slightest bit sleepy. She knew very well that she had been affected by Lu Benlai. She knew that she shouldn't be acting like this, but she still tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep no matter how hard she tried. After some time, she got off the bed and walked to the balcony. She lifted the curtains and peeked down. His car was still there, but the rain had stopped. He wasn't sitting in the car but standing beside it. From the auntie's words, she knew that he would come to her house every night, and sometimes, he would even stay overnight. Was it because of this that she saw him looking so haggard earlier? He said that he wouldn't disturb me and Kiki, so even though he didn't disturb me on the surface, he still came to my house secretly. After standing on the balcony for a while longer, Leng Nuan returned to her bed. She closed her eyes, but she still couldn't fall asleep. So, she got up and walked to the balcony to take a look. After doing this 4 to 5 times, Leng Nuan returned to the balcony. The spot where Lu Benlai's car was parked earlier was already empty. He had left. Leng Nuan stared at the empty spot for a few seconds before returning to her bed. This time, when she closed her eyes, she fell asleep. Because of tonight, Leng Nuan frequently wandered to the balcony on the second night. At around 9:30, she saw Lu Benlai's car driving over. On the third night, his car appeared before 9 o'clock. On the fourth night, his car only appeared at 11 o'clock. Xie Shangzhou stayed in the hospital for a week before he was discharged. Due to his injuries, Lin Jiayi gave him a long leave. And since he was injured because of Lin Jiayi visited him almost every day while he was recuperating. A month later, Xie Shangzhou went for a checkup. He planned to take a taxi to the hospital alone, but before he could leave, he received a call from Lin Jiayi. Lin Jiayi said that she would accompany him for his checkup, and she would be arriving at his house soon. Xie Shangzhou went downstairs, and in less than half a minute, he saw Lin Jiayi's car. In truth, he was already able to drive. He offered to have Lin Jiayi sit in the back seat while he drove, but Lin Jiayi rejected his offer. Upon arriving at the hospital, Lin Jiayi accompanied Xie Shangzhou to find a doctor. After filling out a medical report, he underwent a series of checkup. By the time they received the report, it was already noon. Xie Shangzhou's recovery was quite good. He had basically recovered. After walking out of the hospital, Lin Jiayi didn't wait for Xie Shangzhou to say anything before tossing the car keys over to him, gesturing for him to drive. It wasn't the weekend, so he needed to go to work. When Xie Shangzhou started the car, he habitually asked, "Are you going back to the company?" "Boss Lin." Lin Jiayi shook her head and said, "No, let's go to Beijing World Hotel." Thinking that Lin Jie had an appointment with someone at the Beijing World Hotel, Xie Shangzhou stepped on the accelerator without asking any questions. When they arrived at the Beijing World Hotel and entered the suite, Xie Shangzhou realized that there were only 2 sets of cutlery on the table. He shot a perplexed glance at Lin Jie, only to see her pointing to the empty seat opposite her with a bright smile and saying, "Take a seat." Xie Shangzhou pulled out a chair and sat down as he asked, "Just the 2 of us?" Without replying to Xie Shangzhou, he turned to look at the waiter beside him and said, "Serve the dishes." After the attendant left, Lin Jie noticed that Xie Shangzhou was still staring at her, so she turned to Xie Shangzhou with a smile and said, "I have something to tell you." Chapter 1040. Navigator, come to my office for a moment. I have something to tell you, Xie Shangzhou, where are you? Come here for a moment, I have something to tell you. Navigator, don't leave after work. I have something to tell you. Xie Shangzhou could hear Lin Jie saying this to him almost every day, but for some reason, as soon as she said those words, his heart skipped a beat, and a sense of unease welled up in his heart. He stared at Lin Jie's beautiful face for a moment, but he couldn't find anything amiss. So, he asked, "Boss Lin, did something happen?" Noticing Xie Shangzhou's anxiety, Lin Jie chuckled and replied, "No, it's something good." Lin Jie paused for a moment before adding, "It's work-related, but let's eat first. We'll talk about it after lunch." "If it's work-related, why didn't you talk about it in the office? Why must you talk about it here?" Xie Shangzhou was still feeling uneasy, but seeing that Lin Jie didn't seem any different from usual, he thought that he was just being sensitive, so he listened to her words and didn't ask any further. Soon, the waiter served the dishes that Lin Jie had ordered in advance. Xie Shangzhou took a look and realized that most of them were his favorite dishes. He glanced at Lin Jie in astonishment. Perhaps it was because he had been neglected by her for too long, but the uneasiness in his heart grew even stronger. Lin Jie caught his gaze and smiled at him. She picked up her chopsticks, picked up some food, and placed it on his plate. "Eat while it's hot. Boss Lin, you should eat too." Xie Shangzhou's ears reddened as he stared at the food on his plate for a moment before reluctantly stuffing it into his mouth. Lin Jie didn't seem to have much of an appetite. She didn't touch much of the food before putting down her chopsticks. On the other hand, Xie Shangzhou had eaten quite a bit. By the time he finally stopped eating, he realized that Lin Jie had already wiped her hands and reapplied her lipstick. She was leaning back in her chair and looking at him. He noticed that there was only a tiny bit of oil on her plate, and he couldn't help but frown. "Boss Lin, is your appetite bad? Why haven't you eaten yet? Do you want to take a look at the menu and add something else?" As he spoke, Xie Shangzhou beckoned the waiter over. Lin Jie quickly stopped him and said, "There's no need, I'm not that hungry. But I still have to eat something for lunch." Before Xie Shangzhou could finish his words, Lin Jie interjected once more, "Xie Shangzhou." How often did she hear him do this? Le Mui. The benevolent scorpion department? Stonewall. Bushiyu. Chong. Blink. Euclidean frames. Leech. CMO. Vomit. Rumble. Before Xie Shangzhou could finish his words, Lin Jie interjected once more, "Xie Shangzhou." Lin Jie didn't allow her thoughts to wander too far away, so she quickly reined them in and asked Xie Shangzhou, "How long have you been in the Lin family enterprise?" Perplexed by Lin Jie's sudden question, Xie Shangzhou was taken aback for a moment before replying, "It's been 7 years and 2 months. 7 years and 2 months. More than 2,600 days. What a long time." Hearing Lin Jie's words, Xie Shangzhou didn't say a word, but his heart couldn't help but leap up in his throat. "Navigator, tell me honestly, Are there a lot of people trying to poach you? Chapter 1041. No. Even if someone were to say something about you, I wouldn't believe them. Hearing Lin Jia's reply, Xie Shangzhou calmed down a little, but a moment later, he felt uneasy once more. That can't be right. If no one is going to say anything about me, why is she bringing this up to me for no reason? The more he thought about it, the more Xie Shangzhou felt that it wasn't going to be anything good. He stared at Lin Jia silently, but the corners of his lips were already tightly knitted together. Navigator, it's been so many years since you joined the company, but you're still working under me. It's really a waste of your talents. I've neglected this matter. According to the rules of the Lin Consortium, you should have been promoted a long time ago. You might even be able to lead a department to work on some projects by now. In any case, it's a problem on my end. While you were recuperating from your injuries, I communicated with the shareholders of the Lin Consortium and convinced them to send you to the branch in the east of Beijing as the director. No wonder he had been feeling uneasy. It turned out that when she said she had something to tell him, she wanted to transfer him. No, she wanted a promotion. But he didn't want a promotion or a raise at all. If he wanted to, he could have just jumped ship 6 years ago. At that time, the conditions that others gave him were already tens of millions of dollars a year. Xie Shangzhou subconsciously spoke up, "Boss Lin, I don't think I should." As if she hadn't heard his voice, Lin Jia raised her voice and continued, "The position of director isn't high, but it's currently the highest position in the branch, and it holds the most authority. Because the CEO hasn't been decided yet, Navigator, do a good job when you're there. I guarantee that by the end of the year, you'll be able to become the CEO. Also, as for your salary, since you've been working at the Lin Consortium for 7 years, I've specially fought for a CEO's salary for you. You don't have to worry about the handover of my work, I can handle it. Also, you don't have to come to work for the next few days. While you've just recovered, you should take a good vacation to relax. On the 1st of next month, you can start working at the branch directly. Why so sudden? Is it because I saved you? Are you repaying me? That's not it." Lin Jia shook her head. "It's because of your own hard work. I'm not the kind of person who would use public office for private gain. Take Enchanting for example. He's my boyfriend, but he doesn't know how capable he is. Even if I were to allow him to enter the Lin Consortium, I would only give him a low-level job." He didn't want to leave, but Lin Jia's every word rendered him speechless. If it was anyone else, they would be very happy to face such a thing, right? If he insisted on being her assistant, he was afraid that she would find out that he had other intentions for staying by her side. Xie Shangzhou's lips moved again and again, but in the end, no words came out. Seeing his reaction, Lin Jia couldn't help but feel her heart soften a little. She suddenly wanted to take back her words and consider whether she should continue having him stay by her side. Chapter 1042. He was willing to do anything for his feelings, but she couldn't just watch as he fell too deeply into it. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jia suppressed the softness in her heart and looked at Xie Shangzhou with a smile. "What's wrong, Navigator? Why aren't you reacting at all to your sudden promotion and salary increase? Have you gone silly from joy?" Hearing Lin Jia's question, Xie Shangzhou finally recovered from his daze. He tried his best to suppress the raging emotions in his heart and squeezed out a smile for Lin Jia. "I'm happy. Of course I'm happy. I'm about to become a successful young man, how can I not be happy?" Lin Jia smiled as she raised the teacup on the table towards Xie Shangzhou. "Navigator, thank you for your cooperation over the years. I wish you a bright future ahead of you." He didn't want a bright future, he just wanted to stay by her side, but he didn't have the right to say these words. The only thing he could do was to follow her lead and raise the teacup on the table toward her. Thank you, Boss Lin. I also thank you for your years of nurturing me. I wish you happiness for the rest of your life. Thank you. Lin Jie brought the teacup to her lips with a smile and gulped down the tea in a single gulp. Xie Shangzhou stared at Lin Jie intently, and it was only when she put down the teacup that he retracted his gaze and gulped down the tea in a single gulp. After lunch, Lin Jie was about to return to the company, but Xie Shangzhou offered, Boss Lin, allow me to send you back. There's no need for that. I'll walk by myself. You should go home and rest. Faced with Lin Jie's rejection, Xie Shangzhou pondered for a moment before adding, while there's no need for me to hand over my work, there are still some things that I'm responsible for. I'll follow you back to the company to talk to the secretarial office about some important matters so that you don't end up making a mess of things. Hearing those words, Lin Jie pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. All right. After returning to the company, Lin Jie headed straight for a meeting. Xie Shangzhou looked for the secretary who had been with Lin Jie for the longest time and began handing over his work to her one by one. By the time he was done with the handover of work, 2 hours had already passed. Lin Jie's meeting still hadn't ended yet. Xie Shangzhou sat in his post of 7 years in a daze for a moment before he began tidying up his things. Lin Jie's lost keychain, Lin Jie's lost bag, Lin Jie's lost pen, Lin Jie's lost hair clip. All these years, he would throw those trivial things that she didn't want into the office drawer. At this time, as he organized them, he actually organized a big box. After Xie Shangzhou packed up the things he wanted to take with him, he glanced at the conference room. The door of the conference room was tightly shut, and there was no sign that the meeting was about to end. However, he had no intention of bidding farewell to her after the meeting. Instead, carrying a large suitcase in his arms, he circled around the massive office and scanned his colleagues who were immersed in their work. Eventually, his gaze fell on Lin Jie's office. He stared at the door for a long time, then withdrew his gaze, turned around, and walked away without looking back. She had long known that one day, he would leave her side. Over the years, she had been working hard, hoping that the day of his departure would come a little later, but in the end, the day still came. So, farewell. Chapter 1043. Walking out of Lin's enterprise building, Xie Shangzhou turned around and looked up at the towering building behind him. Then, he walked to the side of the road and hailed a taxi to go home. Sitting in the cab, memories of the past flooded into his mind like a tidal wave. 7 years ago, he had come to the Lin family enterprise to apply for a job, only to find out that the person who had applied for his position was Lin Jie. He thought that he must have forgotten to look at the almanac when he went out today. How unlucky, he had received a call to join the Lin family enterprise, and it was only then that he realized that he was working under Lin Jie. From then on, he began a miserable life of being enslaved by her. When he first entered the workplace, there were many things that he didn't understand, and it was her who taught him. She had a bad temper, but she never despised anyone who was stupid. She allowed him to make mistakes and suffer losses, as long as he learned from his mistakes. He slowly came to understand her better and better, and the day when she would break her heart for Enchanting slowly became the most difficult day in his life, until today, when he left the Lin family enterprise and left her side. After paying the cab fare, Xie Shangzhou returned home, closed the door, and put down the things in his embrace. Suddenly, as if he had lost all of his strength, he collapsed onto his bed. He stared at the ceiling, and as he stared at it, he suddenly raised his hand to cover his eyes. A long while later, tears began trickling down the corners of his eyes. Say, why did I overestimate myself and fall in love with her? Say, why did she kiss me on the cheek when she was drunk and called out Enchanting's name? Say, why isn't she a domineering and unreasonable heiress of a wealthy family? As long as she's in a terrible state, even if it's just a little worse than it is now, he could still find an excuse to make me dislike her less. Xie Shangzhou had no idea how long he had been lying on the bed with his stiff body. All he knew was that by the time he finally regained his senses, the room was already pitch black. He didn't get up to turn on the lights. Instead, he allowed himself to vent his emotions in the darkness for a while before he picked up his phone, searched for Lin Jia's number, and made a call. Soon, the call connected. Hello. Old Xia. Hearing Lin Jia's voice, Xie Shangzhou felt a wave of sadness wash over him. He tried his best to compose himself before saying, "Boss, I need your help with something. It's been so many years since I've asked you for help, but this is the first time." After the meeting, Lin Jia went to meet with her clients. By the time she was done, it was already 8 in the evening. Back in the office, she instinctively dialed Xie Shangzhou's landline number. The phone rang for a long time, but no one picked up. Only then did she realize that Xie Shangzhou had been transferred. She was stunned for a moment. After hanging up the phone, she called Secretary Sunday, "Make me a cup of coffee." Soon, Secretary Sun came in with a cup of coffee. As Lin Jia took the cup of coffee, she casually asked, "What kind of work did Xie Shangzhou hand over to you? Other than these 2 matters, the rest are all trivial matters concerning you, Boss Lin. Assistant Xia asked me to prepare a blanket and a pair of flat shoes for you. She also asked me to jot down some dishes that you don't like to eat." Lin Jia didn't say a word, but the fingers she placed on the table began to curl up. After saying those words, Secretary Sun added, "Right, Boss Lin, there's something important that I haven't told you yet. That, P.S., ha ha ha, I know that you want to send me razor blades, but I really had a great time writing such a plot. Ha 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 ha." Chapter 1044. Assistant Xia. As the words left his mouth, Secretary Sun suddenly realized that Xie Shangzhou was no longer Assistant Xia, so he hurriedly corrected himself and said, "Xie Shangzhou completed his resignation procedures an hour ago." Resignation procedures. The HR department had already closed an hour ago, and even if they hadn't, Navigator would still have to seek approval from his superiors before he could leave. Since the resignation procedures were handled so quickly, it must be because Xie Shangzhou had found someone to help him. Lin Jia frowned. Who did it for him? It was the old chairman who personally called the HR department. However, the resignation procedures weren't handled by Xie Shangzhou, but by Mr. Kobayashi himself. An old chairman and a future successor, how could the HR manager dare to ask too many questions? He immediately followed Mr. Kobayashi's instructions and completed all the procedures for Xie Shangzhou's resignation in less than 10 minutes. Old chairman. Grandfather. Mr. Lin. Lin Jiej. It was no wonder the Human Resources Department was so efficient. The old chairman of the Lin Family Enterprise and the future successor of the Lin Family Enterprise, how could the Human Resources Department dare to offend him? But that was to be expected. Those who had the authority were all members of the Lin family, and it went without saying that Navigator would turn to his university classmate and good friend, Lin Jiej's ATM. Lin Jia fell silent. Seeing that Lin Jia wasn't saying anything, Secretary Sun pondered for a moment. Recalling that Lin Jia had always regarded Xie Shangzhou highly, she asked, "Boss Lin, you intended to promote Xie Shangzhou out of goodwill, but after you transferred him over, he suddenly resigned. Do you think you should give him a call to ask him what's going on?" As if she hadn't heard Secretary Sun's words, Lin Jia didn't respond at all. A moment later, Secretary Sun spoke up once more, "Boss Lin. Boss Lin." She called out a few times before Lin Jia finally recovered from her daze. She first looked at Secretary Sun with a before shaking her head and replying, there's no need for that. I see. The office suddenly fell silent. Secretary Sun waited for a moment, and seeing that Lin Jie had no intention of saying anything else, she spoke up, Boss Lin, if there's nothing else, I'll be taking my leave first. It took a long while before Lin Jie finally replied with a Secretary Sun did not say anything else and quietly left the office. As she closed the door behind her, the office grew even quieter. Lin Jie's expression didn't change much in the slightest as she sat in her office chair. After a long time, she raised her head and looked outside through the glass window in front of her. In the past, whenever she looked in the office, she would always see Xie Shangzhou's desk. But now, the desk was completely empty. Other than his laptop, everything else was gone. Staring at the empty seat in front of her, Lin Jie suddenly felt as if she had lost something in her life, and an emptiness filled her heart. She didn't know how much time had passed before her phone rang on her desk. Chapter 1045. Time flowed by like flowing water. In the blink of an eye, the scorching summer had turned into the frigid early winter. It was early November, and the rain in the evening made the already cold weather even colder. Even though the heater wasn't turned on yet, it was still chilly. In the morning, when Leng Nuan sent Kiki to kindergarten, Kiki sneezed a little. After returning from kindergarten in the afternoon, Kiki wasn't as energetic as usual, so she didn't eat much for dinner. Afraid that Kiki would fall sick, Leng Nuan gave her a bath early before coaxing her into bed. Due to the cold weather, Leng Nuan even added a blanket for Kiki. Coco fell asleep before 9 o'clock. Leng Nuan had some unfinished work to do, so she quietly left the bedroom and headed to the living room to work overtime with her laptop. At around 10, the glass of water beside her laptop was empty. She subconsciously wanted to call for the auntie to refill her glass, but she swallowed the words back down. She got up and headed to the dining room to get herself a glass of warm water. While drinking the water, she pretended to be admiring the night view as she walked to the balcony and looked downstairs. The car that would usually be parked downstairs at this hour hadn't appeared yet. Leng Nuan didn't pay too much attention to it. After drinking the water, she returned to her laptop and continued working. By the time she was done with her work, it was already around 11. She closed her laptop and headed to the balcony to get a change of underwear. Just as she was about to head to the shower, she glanced downstairs once more. It was still empty. In the past, his car would always appear downstairs at 11 at the latest. Why isn't he here even after 11 tonight? Leng Nuan stared blankly downstairs for a moment before entering the bathroom. While bathing, Leng Nuan roughly counted the days in her heart. As she counted, she hastily rinsed off the shower gel on her body, wiped off the water droplets, put on her pajamas, and hurried to the bedside. She picked up her phone and took a look at the time she had recorded. She counted 3 times before she could confirm that tonight was the 101st day. It was the 101st day since the first time he appeared downstairs. In other words, the day before yesterday was the 99th day, and yesterday was the 100th day. Since he didn't appear today. Does this mean that he has given up, just like the 100 calls I gave him back then? Leng Nuan subconsciously tightened her grip around her phone. When she finally came back to her senses, she realized that she had been influenced by Liu Benlai once more. Actually, all these years, he had always been that person who could inadvertently affect her emotions. It was just that she had tried her best to restrain herself. Just like in the past 3 months, ever since she found out that he would come to her house every day, she had been constantly affected by him. Now that she had endured 100 days, she thought that in the future, she would completely calm down and not be affected by him like this, right? With such thoughts in mind, Leng Nuan tried her best to suppress the surging emotions in her heart. She put down her phone and headed to the bathroom to dry her hair. After leaving the room, Lingwan didn't head straight to bed. Instead, she headed to the nursery to check on Kiki. Coco lay on the bed, sleeping soundly, her face red. Chapter 1046. When it was about time, Lingwan took the thermometer and took a look. It was 39 degrees Celsius. Lingwan didn't dare to casually use medicine on Kiki's fever, so she used alcohol to lower Kiki's temperature, hoping to see if it could help with the fever. However, even after an hour, Kiki's temperature showed no signs of going down. Feeling a little worried, Lingwan instructed the auntie to take care of her before leaving with Kiki and her wallet. After walking down the stairs, Lingwan ran out of the neighborhood with Kiki in her arms and stood at the entrance to hail a cab. As it was already late, taxis were scarce. Lingwan stood in the cold wind for more than 10 minutes, but seeing that no cab was coming, she decided to carry Kiki and run to the nearby hospital. She was so worried about Coco that she didn't pay attention to her surroundings. All she saw was a car coming towards her. When it came to her side, it stopped for a moment. She didn't pay it much attention and quickly ran past the car. She walked for about 10 meters when the car suddenly reversed to her side, violating the rules. Hearing the commotion, Lingwan subconsciously glanced at the car beside her. The car window rolled down, revealing Liu Benlai's face, whom she thought wouldn't appear tonight. He was dressed in a very formal suit, and his hair was waxed. Even though he was sitting in the car, she could still smell the faint scent of alcohol and perfume. She thought that he was probably at a dinner party and had just ended. While Lingwan's mind was wandering, Liu Benlai suddenly spoke up, "What's wrong?" Lingwan, who was still immersed in her own thoughts, didn't say a word. Liu Benlai frowned when he saw Kiki in her arms. "Kiki, what's wrong?" he asked as he pushed open the car door and got out. Walking up to Lingwan's side, he noticed that Kiki's face was abnormally red, and his frown deepened. He reached out to touch Kiki's head, only to realize that it was frighteningly hot. Thus, he hurriedly reached out to hug Kiki. "I'll send you to the hospital." His actions alarmed Lingwan. Noticing her reaction, Liu Benlai quickly retracted his hand and said, "It's already so late, so it's hard to hail a cab. Why don't you get into my car? I'll send you to the hospital." Noticing his reaction, Lingwan stared at his clenched fist for a moment before nodding her head lightly. Seeing her nod in agreement, Liu Benlai nearly burst into laughter on the spot. He took 2 steps back to the side of his car, and he was just about to walk around the car to open the passenger door for her when he recalled that she was carrying Coco, so he decided to open the back door instead. After Lingwan carried Coco into the car, Liu Benlai helped her close the car door before quickly getting into the car. After which, he turned the car around and drove toward the hospital. On the way to the hospital, the two of them didn't talk at all. However, from time to time, Liu Benlai would glance at Lingwan. When he noticed that Lingwan's head was tilted to the side as she stared at the toys and clothes placed on the back seat, he coughed awkwardly and explained, "I bought those things for Kiki. I don't know if Kiki will like it, especially the clothes and shoes. I don't even know if the size is right. I know you don't need it, but I don't have any other intentions. I just bought it because it looks good." "Don't worry." Retracting her gaze from the toys and clothes, Lingwan turned to stare out of the window, not saying a single word. Chapter 1047. A second after Liu Benlai parked the car at the hospital, the worried Lingwan immediately reached out to push open the car door. Before Lingwan could get out of the car with Coco in her arms, Liu Benlai was already standing by the back door. When Lingwan got out of the car, he noticed that Lingwan was struggling to carry Coco, so he reached out to help her. Lingwan's movements stiffened a little, but she didn't avoid Liu Benlai. After getting out of the car, Ling Wan carried Coco and headed straight for the emergency building. Lu Benlai closed the car door and hurriedly chased after them. Just as they were about to register, Lu Benlai called out to Ling Wan, "I'll go." "It's not convenient for you to carry a child." Ling Wan hesitated for a moment before passing Coco's information over to Lu Benlai. While registering, Lu Benlai took a look at Coco's birthday, 28th of March. So, Coco is a little lamb. Even though it was late at night, there were still quite a number of people who came to the emergency room to treat children. When they arrived at the designated department, Ling Wan saw that there were still around a dozen numbers ahead of her, so she turned to Lu Benlai and said, "Thank you for tonight. I can stay here alone for now. It's getting late, so you should head back and rest." Lu Benlai stared at the thin sweater Ling Wan was wearing for a moment before nodding his head. He didn't follow Ling Wan inside. Seeing that he wasn't saying anything, Ling Wan didn't say anything either. She carried Coco to the consultation room and found a spot to queue up. Roughly an hour later, it was finally Coco's turn. Coco was fine. Perhaps it was due to the sudden drop in temperature, but her fever was still too high. Under the doctor's guidance, Ling Wan still gave Coco some medicine. She carried Coco out of the emergency building, intending to head straight to the hospital entrance to hail a cab home. But before she could walk down the stairs, she saw Lu Benlai standing under the streetlight. Her footsteps subconsciously came to a halt. Lu Benlai had already noticed her, and upon seeing her, he straightened his back and asked, "Coco, are you all right?" Ling Wan shook her head. "I'm fine." "It's good that you're fine." Lu Benlai was rendered speechless. After a moment of silence, he spoke up once more, "It's already too late, and the weather is cold. Don't carry Coco. You'll worsen her illness. So, I'll send you back." Ling Wan nodded her head lightly. Lu Benlai inwardly heaved a sigh of relief, as if he was overjoyed. He took out the clothes he had hidden behind him and said, "You should wear a coat. You were in a hurry to leave the house, so you didn't wear anything. Don't fall sick before Kiki recovers." Ling Wan stared at the clothes in Lu Benlai's hands for a moment before replying softly, "Thank you." Lu Benlai knew that she had agreed to it, so he reached out to drape his jacket over Ling Wan. After that, the two of them stopped talking. Returning to the car, Ling Wan carried Kiki and sat in the back seat. She gazed at the night scenery outside the window. Perhaps it was because Lu Benlai had added a coat for her, but she suddenly recalled the time when she went to the movies with Shi Yao and the others in her third year of university. It was also November, and Beijing had just started to get cold, so the heater hadn't been installed yet. She was so cold that she couldn't stop shivering. When he sent her a message, she casually replied that it was really cold today, and her hands and feet were freezing. Then, when she was done shopping with Shi Yao and the others and walked out of the shopping mall, she saw him holding the clothes in his hands. Chapter 1048. Ever since then, the two of them had been getting along very well. He was her salvation. Bit by bit, he helped her let go of that nightmare and start a new life like a normal girl. The strength he gave her was something she couldn't believe. She had been trying her best to let go of the past, and she had even thought of telling him about the nightmares she had been through. But for some reason, he had suddenly let go. So completely. For a month, he had completely shut her out of his world. It was only when she was stopped by the receptionist at the entrance of his company, saying that he was out on a business trip, that she saw him walking out of the company with her own eyes, that she finally understood that she had been abandoned by her salvation. It was her own decision to accept him back then, so she was willing to bear the consequences no matter how she ended up. So, after he left, she accepted the fact that she couldn't sleep at night. She accepted the fact that she suddenly burst into tears when she saw other girls hanging out with their boyfriends. Even when she found out that she was pregnant with Kiki 2 months later, she accepted the fact that she was pregnant with him. No one knew how much effort and time it took for her to slowly get used to a life without him. But now, he had suddenly appeared in her world and wanted to enter her life. She really couldn't bear the consequences. It didn't take long for the car to stop below Leng Wan's apartment. She pushed open the car door, and when she got out, Lu Benlai glanced at the coat she had placed on the back seat. "Keep your coat on. It's not too far away, but it's still quite cold." Leng Wan shook her head and replied, "It's fine, there's no need for that." Then, she carried Kiki out of the car. She glanced at Lu Benlai, who had gotten out of the car with her, and after a moment of thought, she said, "Thank you," before turning around and heading back into the building. Looking at her departing back, Lu Benlai suddenly couldn't recall why they had broken up so easily back then. He didn't have the guts to ask her, so he tested her. When he found out that something really happened between her and another man, he ignored her. At the time, he blamed her and thought that she might not have any feelings for him. He was a little disheartened, but he couldn't bring himself to cut all ties with her. Then he struggled between love and not love, letting go, continuing or not continuing. It wasn't until she left and he couldn't find her anymore that he realized that he had lost the girl he chased after when he was young. If he hadn't tested her back then, if he hadn't harbored the thought of letting go of her, would they have never been separated? Would he have been able to be like Lin Jiej, accompanying Shuyao from her school uniform to her wedding dress, all the way to Coco's birth? In the 2 months since Xie Shangzhou's resignation, Lin Jie hadn't met him even once. She knew that he was still in Beijing, and he often met up with Lin Jiej. He was busy with his own business, but she wasn't too sure what his business was about, so she didn't ask Lin Jiej about it. Habit is the scariest thing in the world. She had never really believed in this saying, but in the past 2 months, she had truly experienced how difficult it was to get rid of a habit that had already been formed. Chapter 1049. At first, when she went out to socialize and needed the car, she would always call his number. Later, she saved an empty number under his name. It was fine if she didn't count it, but when she did, she actually dialed that number 435 times. She had to meet with clients almost every day, and when she introduced her new assistant, there were 40 to 50 times that she said the wrong name. Her new assistant was a new graduate named Wang Lingli, but she would always inadvertently say, "This is my assistant, Xie Shangzhou." For the past 70-odd days, she had been doing pretty well. It was no different from before. She was busy with work, making money, shopping, dating Qin Ting. But in these 70-odd days, she felt like she hadn't been doing so well. Did Qin Ting treat her well? Pretty well, even better than when she was in university. But she always felt like something was wrong. Many times after she finished work, she stood on the streets of Beijing late at night, and no one handed her a cloak to protect her from the cold. Many times when she returned home and saw the messy room, she was so upset that she had to call the housekeeper overnight to clean it up. There was no one there anymore, and she didn't need to tell them that everything was neat and tidy. Actually, she had told Qin Ting about her period, but Qin Ting didn't seem to care too much. Just like this afternoon, her lower abdomen was aching. She knew that her period was coming. The first thing she did when she returned to the office was to find a sanitary pad and stuff it into her bag. In the evening, she wanted something to drink, so she called her secretary and asked her to make her a cup of coffee. After a second, she changed it to, "Give me a cup of brown sugar water." Soon, the secretary brought over a cup of brown sugar water. After the secretary left, she was almost done with her work. She picked up the brown sugar water, but before she could drink it, her mood suddenly plummeted. She never knew that one day, she would have to learn how to take care of herself. It was also the first time in the past 70 days that she had to admit that she really missed that little brother who was 2 years younger than her. In the end, she didn't even take a sip of the brown sugar water. After she put down the cup, she wasn't in a hurry to get off work. Instead, she opened the drawer and took out a high-end velvet box. After she opened it, there was a sparkling diamond ring inside. Enchanting had given it to her when he proposed to her a few days ago. Ever since she met Enchanting at the age of 18, she only had one thought in her mind, and that was to marry Enchanting. Later, when she thought he was dead, she never thought about marriage again. Chapter 1050. The situation that day was actually quite awkward, but in the end, Enchanting gave her a way out. Enchanting, I'll keep the ring for now. Once I've made up my mind, I'll wear it. Lin Jie stared at the ring for a long while before reaching out to pick it up. But in the end, she gave up and closed the box before placing it back into the drawer. She had a business meeting tonight, so she took a look at the time. It was about time for her to set off, so she had her assistant prepare the car. Perhaps it was due to the sudden cold weather, or perhaps it was due to the absence of his care, but her abdomen would ache from time to time during the business meeting. Even though she was in a warm room, she still felt that her hands and feet were freezing cold. Since it was a business meeting, there were bound to be people toasting her. When he was still around, she couldn't remember having so many people toasting her, but now, she realized that she seemed to have an endless supply of alcohol. Finally, after the dinner was over, she came out of the restaurant and couldn't wait to ask her assistant to send her home. She went upstairs, entered her fingerprint, and pushed open the door, only to see a floor of shoes, bags, and clothes strewn all over the floor. It was usually fine, but before her period came, she found such a messy scene inexplicably annoying. She called the auntie, hoping to have her face cleaned up as well, but for some reason, the auntie didn't pick up her phone. She tried to clean up by herself, but the more she tried, the messier it became. In the end, she ended up leaving even more bags and clothes on the floor. Out of sight, out of mind, she removed her makeup and went to take a bath. When she came out of the bathroom, she was wrapped in a bathrobe. While she was looking for her pajamas, she accidentally stepped on a puddle of water and slipped. It was fortunate that she managed to grab onto the cabinet beside her in time, so she didn't fall to the floor. Even so, she still bumped her knee, and a large amount of blood seeped out. The wound wasn't serious, but she felt an inexplicable discomfort. She had no idea what had gotten into her today, but when she squatted down to look at the wound on her knee, her abdomen started hurting again. This time, the pain was different from the one she had experienced in the afternoon. It was unbearable, as if a knife was being twisted around her abdomen, causing her entire body to tremble. She clutched her lower abdomen, enduring the pain. However, the pain did not seem to have any signs of slowing down. Instead, it became more and more intense. In the end, the pain caused her face to turn pale and sweat to appear on her forehead. She knew that when it came to menstrual cramps, even if she went to the hospital, the doctor wouldn't be able to do anything. However, the pain was unbearable. She forced herself to reach out and grab her phone. She wanted to call someone to take her to the hospital for a painkiller. There were hundreds of phone numbers in her contact list. She flipped through them again and again, but for some reason, she stopped at the last number. That was Xia Shangzhou's number. She had purposely left it at the end. She stared at the phone number for a while and wanted to call the old mansion and ask Auntie Sun to call the family doctor for her. That was what she really thought, but perhaps the pain in her lower abdomen was too intense, and her hands trembled. Or perhaps her movements weren't controlled by her brain, but the number she dialed wasn't to the old mansion, but to Xia Shangzhou. At first, she didn't react until the call was picked up and Xia Shangzhou's voice came through. Chief Lin. Lin Jiayi suddenly froze, forgetting about the pain in her abdomen. Chief Lin. Xie Shangzhou, who was waiting for her voice, called out again. Chapter 1051. Boss Lin. Xie Shangzhou couldn't wait for her voice, so he called out once more. Right after he said those words, Lin Jiayi could clearly hear two dog barks coming from the other side. The barks sounded childish, so it was likely that they were puppies. Judging from how close they were, it was clear that they were coming from right beside him. Lin Jiayi couldn't help but frown. Did the navigator raise a puppy? She remembered that he was very afraid of dogs. Back when she first learned of this weakness of his, it was when he had just joined the Lin Corporation. She brought him to a friend's house, and as soon as he entered the house, the two huskies raised by his friend immediately pounced at him, causing him to jump up in fright. He hid behind her, trembling in fear as he stared at the two huskies. Boss Lin, can I leave first? Back then, she found his cowardly look especially amusing, so she refused to let him leave. In the 2 hours they spent at his friend's house, he stared at the two huskies with a pale face the entire time. There was a long period of time when she mocked him mercilessly with the dogs, but he didn't get angry at all. Later on, when she met his younger sister, she realized that it was because he was a mischievous child who feared nothing in the world. In the mouths of a bunch of stray dogs, he insisted on snatching a piece of meat from them, and the stray dogs chased him across half a town. While he wasn't bitten, from then on, he started cowering whenever he saw a dog. Back then, when his younger sister told him about this matter, she also looked as if she was telling a joke. His face reddened from holding back his anger, and he wanted to scold his younger sister, but she was happy to hear it, so he held it in. Back then, she didn't understand what he meant by that. She thought that he was doting on his younger sister, but now that she thought about it, it seemed like he was really happy for her. No wonder she hadn't been as happy as she used to be after he left. It turned out that no one was thinking of ways to make her happy anymore. While Lin Jiayi was in a daze, she didn't say a word. On the other end, Xie Shangzhou didn't hang up either. It was just that he thought that she had dialed the wrong number just like before, so he stopped listening to the conversation. Instead, he muttered to himself to the puppy beside him, I dialed the wrong number again, that's right. Only when I call the wrong number will I receive her call. Throughout the entire process, Lin Jiayi's phone hadn't left her ear, so when she heard Xie Shangzhou's words, her fingers couldn't help but tremble a little. It was hard to tell whether it was due to her age making it easier for her to be moved by small details, or it was because she wasn't feeling well today, but in any case, she suddenly felt a surge of emotions welling up in her chest. She didn't say anything. Over the phone, she heard the sound of Xie Shangzhou's puppy gnawing on something. As Lin Jiayi listened on, she suddenly felt a lump in her throat, and her eyes reddened. She tried very hard to calm herself down, but she couldn't control it. In the end, a very fragmented sob leaked out from the corner of her mouth. Although it was very soft, Xie Shangzhou, who was on the other side of the phone, heard it. Boss Lin. Mr. Lin, you. Perhaps he wanted to say that he was crying, but at the last moment, he changed his words. What's wrong? Chapter 1052. Lin Jiayi clutched her phone tightly as she sat on the floor of the changing room for a long time. Only then did she slowly stand up, casually grab a sleeping robe, and wrap it around herself. The wound on her leg wasn't serious, but it had bled quite a bit. She went to the living room and rummaged through the drawers to look for the medicine box to disinfect it and apply a band-aid, but she couldn't find it at all. She picked up her phone again, wanting to call her assistant and ask her to buy some band-aids from the pharmacy. However, when she unlocked the screen, she saw the text message that Xie Shangzhou had sent her a few minutes ago. CEO Lin, is everything okay for you to call me? Boss Lin, are you alright? He sent 2 consecutive messages. There weren't any fancy words, but she could tell that he was worried about her. Yet, he appeared to be very restrained, just like how he had always been by her side. She thought that he was probably trying his best to conceal his inner thoughts. Lin Jiayi raised her hand and replied, I'm fine. She was just about to exit the chat with Xia Shangzhou to tap on her assistant's number when she suddenly remembered that Xia Shangzhou had always been the one to tidy up her things for her. Thus, she casually sent another message, Right, navigator, where did you put my medicine box? A second after she sent the message, her phone received an incoming call. It was from Xia Shangzhou. Lin Jiayi picked up the call, and Xia Shangzhou's voice sounded from the other side. Even though he had tried his best to restrain himself, Lin Jiayi could still sense his anxiety. Boss Lin, are you sick? Boss Lin, why didn't you go to the hospital if you were sick? Lin Jiayi quickly replied, It's nothing. I just accidentally knocked myself over. Lin Jiayi paused for a moment before continuing, Do you still remember where you put your medicine box? Boss Lin, you're at home. Xia Shangzhou didn't answer her question. That's right, in that case, Chief Lin, please wait for me for a moment. The medicine in your house has probably passed its expiry date. No one has changed the medicine in these few months, so don't use it for now. I'll go buy some new ones and send them over to you. As Xia Shangzhou's words drifted into Lin Jiayi's ears, she heard noises coming from the other end of the line. It was the sound of him putting on his clothes. Soon, there was the sound of him opening and closing the door. Boss Lin, I'll hang up first. I'm already out, recovering from her daze, Lin Jiayi replied with an oh, but she didn't stop him from coming. Xia Shangzhou did not speak again. When he heard her reply, he hung up the phone. Lin Jiayi had no idea what she was feeling so nervous about. In the past, she would meet with Xia Shangzhou every day, and she would act as casually as she did with him. In fact, there were even times when she would ask Xia Shangzhou to help her zip up the back of her dress. It had only been 2 months since they last met, and just as they were about to meet again, she actually felt so nervous. What the heck? Lin Jiayi really suspected that Xia Shangzhou had come over on a rainbow-colored cloud. 10 minutes after he hung up the phone, her doorbell rang. Almost reflexively, she ran to the entrance and glanced at the surveillance camera on the wall. When she saw that it was Xia Shangzhou, she pushed the door open. Chapter 1053. Compared to 2 months ago, Xia Shangzhou had gotten much thinner and tanner. His hair had been cut much shorter, and he looked more spirited and more manly. But then again, as a business, how could he possibly blacken himself? Was he supposed to be outdoors every day? Lin Jiayi couldn't help but frown. Boss Lin. Compared to Lin Jiayi, Xia Shangzhou was much quicker to recover from his daze. His voice was calm, no different from his usual self, but only the heavens could tell how much agitation he was feeling right now. She was as fair and beautiful as ever. Her long and curly hair was half wet and draped over the back of her head. Her toenails, which were wearing furry slippers, had a new color to them. Her calves were fair and straight. It seemed like she had been living a pretty good life without him. Lin Jiayi, who had recovered from her daze by Xia Shangzhou's words, opened the door, and said, Come in. Xia Shangzhou walked into the room with a bag in his hand. When Lin Jiayi opened the shoe cabinet to take out a pair of slippers for him, he saw that the slippers he had worn before were still there. His fingertips subconsciously trembled as he replied to Lin Jiayi with a thank you, before bending down to change into his slippers silently. After changing into the slippers, Xia Shangzhou walked into the room. Lin Jiayi looked around the room, but she couldn't find a place for Xia Shangzhou to sit. So, she shot a glance at Xia Shangzhou, only to see a calm expression on the young man's face despite the mess in the room. It was clear that he was used to it, and she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. It was the same in the past, so why didn't I feel embarrassed? With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jia walked over to the sofa and tossed her expensive clothes and bag onto the floor before making room for Xie Shangzhou. Seeing her actions, Xie Shangzhou sighed helplessly and said, "Boss Lin, I think it's best if you don't do this. Let me do it later." As he said those words, Xie Shangzhou walked over to the cabinet by the side, opened the door, and took out his first aid box. "Boss Lin, where did you knock yourself?" Xie Shangzhou asked as he looked around the room, and the only place that Lin Jia could sit on was the bed in her bedroom. Thus, he could only point to the bedroom and say, "Sit there, I'll apply some ointment for you." "Oh, all right." Lin Jia didn't turn down his offer. She walked over to the bed and sat down. She lifted up her sleeping gown, revealing the bruises on her knees. Xie Shangzhou looked at her wound and suddenly thought of a joke on the internet. If he had come a little later, the wound would have healed. However, Xie Shangzhou's tense heart finally relaxed despite wanting to laugh. Thank goodness it wasn't that serious. He had thought it would be much more serious. She had caused him to be in the car the entire time he had been running. Even though the wound was about to close up, Xie Shangzhou still applied 2 band-aids for Lin Jia's wound to disinfect it. When he stood up, he noticed that Lin Jia's forehead was tightly knitted together. "What happened?" Xie Shangzhou asked as he shot a glance at Lin Jia's knee. "Did I hurt you when I was disinfecting it earlier?" "That's not it." Lin Jia shook her head. After which, she clutched her stomach and added, "My stomach hurts. Why does your stomach hurt? How about I send you to the hospital for a checkup?" Go to the hospital is useless. Chapter 1054. So, she's suffering from period cramps. She did suffer from period cramps, but she couldn't blame anyone for that. She was the one who didn't pay attention to her period cramps. In the winter, she ignored the temperature and ate ice cream crazily in the summer. There was no one who could stop her. Every time her period came around, she would shout that she would never eat ice cream again. But when her period passed, she would forget about the pain and return to her old self. In the years that he was by her side, he had tried to discipline her, but to no avail. In the end, he had no choice but to give her a cup of brown sugar ginger tea every day when her period was approaching. Then again, he would have her auntie brew some blood-nourishing and womb-warming medicinal soup for her during that period of time. It was only after a year that her period cramps slowly disappeared. But it hadn't been long since he left her, and she had already reverted back to her old self. But then again, Enchanting sure is a person. Doesn't he know what's wrong with his girlfriend? He doesn't even put in any effort, suppressing the urge to criticize Lin Jia and Enchanting. Xie Shangzhou suppressed the heartache in his heart and stood up silently before walking out of the bedroom. Seeing that the navigator had left without saying a word, Lin Jia called out to him in surprise, "Navigator." Xie Shangzhou's footsteps didn't stop. Lin Jia glared at his back with a frown on her forehead. Is he angry? With such thoughts in mind, she stood up and chased after him while clutching her aching stomach. But as soon as she reached the entrance of the bedroom, she saw him walking into the dining room. Lin Jia was just about to call out to Xie Shangzhou when she saw him pouring a pot of water and boiling it. Then, he took out a hot water bottle from the drawer and poured the boiling water into it. After which, he took out some brown sugar from her cabinet and brewed a cup of brown sugar water. After which, he walked over to her with the hot water bottle in one hand and the brown sugar water in the other. As he walked up to her, he noticed that she wasn't wearing shoes, and a frown appeared on his forehead. Say, Boss Lin, you're already 30 years old. Why are you still running around barefooted like a snack? Had it been in the past, Lin Jiayi would have long slapped Xie Shangzhou's head if she heard such impudent words from him. But this time, she didn't talk back to him. Instead, she turned around and returned to the bedroom to sit on the bed. Xie Shangzhou pinched her quilt. There's no heater. It's so cold now. Why are you still covering yourself with such a thin quilt? As he spoke, he stuffed the hot water bottle into her arms. Warm your stomach first. It should be able to relieve your pain. As he spoke, he glanced at her wet hair, got up, and went into the bathroom. He came out with a hairdryer and sat on the bed to help her dry her hair. President Lin, my mom said that women must blow-dry their hair immediately after washing it. Otherwise, it'll be easy for them to catch a cold. This habit of yours is really bad. Amidst Xie Shangzhou's nagging, Lin Jiayi's hair was slowly dried by him. After putting away the hairdryer, Xie Shangzhou walked back to the bed and touched the bowl of brown sugar water. When he felt that it was warm enough, he passed it over to Lin Jiayi and said, "Drink this brown sugar water. I'll get you a thicker blanket." Xie Shangzhou waited until Lin Jiayi took the cup and headed back to the changing room. Then, as if recalling something, he turned around to look at Lin Jiayi and said, "Remember to drink it all. Don't pour it out secretly like before." Hearing those words, Lin Jiayi was rendered speechless for a moment. She waited for him to disappear from the changing room before she picked up the bowl of brown sugar water and took a sip. It was still a taste that she didn't like, but the brown sugar water that he had given her was surprisingly to her taste. P.S. Maybe it's because I'm getting old that I really like characters like old Xia who accompany me silently. Chapter 1055. Lin Jiayi took small sips at a time, and when she had drunk half of the cup, she stared at the brown sugar water in her hand and fell into a daze. Unbeknownst to her, her lips had curled up ever so slightly. Not too long later, a commotion sounded at the entrance of the changing room. Recovering from her daze, Lin Jiayi raised her head and saw Xie Shangzhou walking out of the changing room with a blanket in his arms. She hurriedly brought the cup to her lips and gulped down the rest of the brown sugar water. By the time Xie Shangzhou walked over to the bed, Lin Jiayi had just finished the brown sugar water, and she lowered the cup from her lips. This was the first time Xie Shangzhou was seeing her, so he didn't have to urge her or watch her. Instead, he took the initiative to finish the brown sugar water and said, "This is the first time I've seen you so obedient." Embarrassed by the compliment, Lin Jiayi shot a glance at Xie Shangzhou before lowering her eyes. It didn't take long for Lin Jiayi to realize that there was something wrong with her reaction. No, more accurately, there was something wrong with the words of the navigator. "This is the first time I've seen you so obedient." Ah. This isn't just a little problem, it's a huge problem. What do you mean by, "This is the first time I've seen you so obedient"? When have I ever been disobedient? Pooey. Is this something that I should be conflicted about? What I should be conflicted about is that these words that are meant to coax a child aren't words that I should be saying to her. Even if I have to say it, I should be the one saying it to him, all right? It's been 70 days since we last met, and the navigator has become so impudent. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jiayi raised her head and glared at Xie Shangzhou before passing the cup over to him. "Go wash the cup." Xie Shangzhou took the cup without hesitation and headed to the dining room. Lin Jiayi had drunk quite a bit of alcohol that night, and her body wasn't feeling too well. So, a second after Xie Shangzhou walked out of the bedroom, she quickly fell asleep on the bed. By the time Xie Shangzhou returned to the bedroom after washing the cup, she was already fast asleep. He didn't disturb her. Instead, he quietly closed the bedroom door and, just like before, began to tidy up the room. He knew very well that after he tidied up the messy living room, he should leave, so he purposely slowed down and dragged out the time. However, no matter how much time he wasted, in the end, there was nothing left to tidy up. He raised his head to look at the clock on the wall. It was already 5:00 in the morning. According to her usual routine, she would wake up after about 3 hours. In the past, when he was her assistant, if she slept at the old residence, someone would prepare breakfast for her when she woke up, so she would eat some. If she stayed at her own place, she would wake up and go to the company with an empty stomach. Later, when he discovered this situation, he would help her keep an eye on her breakfast. Now that he was no longer by her side, would she still remember to prepare breakfast for him? After thinking about it, Xie Shangzhou went to the dining room to take a look. There was nothing in the fridge except some yogurt and herbal tea. There was only one ham sausage left, and it had just expired a few days ago. From the looks of it, this ham sausage was probably the one he bought and put in her fridge. It looked like he was right. After he left, her fridge became a decoration again. Xie Shangzhou closed the fridge door and went to the supermarket helplessly. Half an hour later, he came back with big and small bags in his hands. Before long, her fridge was filled to the brim. Chapter 1056. After washing his hands, he began preparing breakfast for her. Even though she was the only one eating, he still made a sumptuous meal. From the soft porridge to the refreshing side dishes, to steamed eggs, pancakes, and soy milk, everything was her favorite. The porridge was simmered over a small fire, so it took a long time to cook. By the time Xie Shangzhou lifted the lid for the 5th time and saw that the porridge was almost done, he was just about to turn off the fire when he noticed a figure standing at the entrance of the kitchen from the corner of his eye. His hands trembled in fright, and he nearly dropped the lid on the floor. When he finally calmed himself down, he turned his gaze over and saw that it was Lin Jie, who had woken up at some point in time. She was wrapped in a sleeping robe, and she exuded a lazy aura. Meeting his gaze, she greeted him with a "morning" before covering her mouth and yawning. Xie Shangzhou stared at Lin Jie's face for a moment, but he couldn't tell when she had come over. So, he replied, "Morning." Then, he lowered his head to take a look at the time. It was just 7:20 a.m., about an hour before she woke up. So, he asked, "Boss Lin, why are you awake so early?" In truth, her sleep quality was quite good. Usually, the moment she closed her eyes, she would wake up naturally. Perhaps it was because she had drunk a large cup of brown sugar water before she slept, but she felt like heading to the washroom early in the morning. By the time she returned to her bed in a daze, she collapsed onto the bed and closed her eyes. But before she could fall asleep, she heard the sound of the door. At first, she couldn't wrap her head around it. She lay on the bed, half asleep, half asleep. Then she remembered that before she fell asleep last night, he was at her house. Could it be that the sound of the door just now was the sound of him leaving? As this thought flashed across Lin Jie's mind, she immediately woke up. She subconsciously pulled off the blanket, leaped off the bed, and ran out of the bedroom. What entered her sight was a clean and tidy living room, as well as an empty room. She had lived in a huge house ever since she was young, and she liked spacious environments. But at that moment, standing in her own house, she suddenly felt a little lonely. She was in a daze for a long time before she returned to the bedroom. When she sat on the bed in a daze, she heard the door open again. Other than him, only Lin Jie, Shi Yao, and Auntie Lin knew the password to her house. Auntie Lin shouldn't be at work at this hour, and Lin Jie and Shi Yao couldn't possibly be here either. Could he have returned? She was afraid that she was imagining things. She was also afraid that when she saw the huge living room, the strong sense of loneliness would sweep over her again, so she sat on the bed and didn't move. After a while, she heard some light and heavy noises coming from outside. That was when she was sure he was back. Curious as to what he was doing, she opened the door and walked out. Then, through the glass door, she saw him taking out one thing after another from the bag and stuffing it into the fridge. So, he went out just now, to buy something for her. Come to think of it, it seemed like when he was her assistant, whenever she opened the fridge, she could find her favorite food and drinks. Unlike now, every time she was hungry, she could open the fridge and find yogurt and herbal tea, and yogurt and herbal tea. She didn't make a sound to disturb him, and he didn't notice that she was awake. After filling up her fridge, he went into the kitchen and started working. Chapter 1057. From washing the rice, to chopping the vegetables, to squeezing the soybean milk, to laying out the pancakes. Every single action of his was executed smoothly and skillfully. She didn't know why, but memories of his past kept flashing through her mind. She recalled that when he first joined the company, they rented a villa in the suburbs of the capital for a team-building event, and the rule was that everyone had to cook their signature dish. She was the only one who knew how to cook instant noodles. In any case, she was the one who paid the salaries, so she had the final say. Her signature dish was instant noodles, and he said that his signature dish was instant noodles as well. However, a second after he said those words, she shot him a fierce glare, and he immediately cowered and changed his words, saying that his signature dish was pickled pepper chicken feet. But not only did he fail to cook the pickled pepper chicken feet, he ended up cutting a huge gash on his hand instead. In any case, as someone who had never cooked before, she even mocked him mercilessly when she saw him fumbling around in the kitchen. But now, after 7 years, he seemed to have become a completely different person. Not only was he able to cook breakfast, he was even able to cook a sumptuous and exquisite meal. 7 years. Was it because of her that he had become who he was today over the past 7 years? Boss Lin. Noticing that Lin Jiayi was staring at him intently, Xie Shangzhou couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Recovering from her daze, Lin Jiayi replied with a very natural, "Oh," before pointing to the dining room behind her. "I was thirsty, so I came out to drink some water. I heard some commotion in the kitchen, so I came over to take a look. I see. It just so happens that I just made some water and left it to dry in the kettle. The temperature should be just right now. I'll go pour you a cup," Xie Shangzhou said as he walked over to the kitchen counter. But before he could reach Lin Jiayi had already said, "I'll go by myself." After saying those words, Lin Jiayi rushed ahead of him and walked over to the counter. She poured 2 cups of water and passed one of them to Xie Shangzhou. "You didn't sleep the entire night." This was the first time she had poured water for him. Xie Shangzhou felt like he was dreaming. He stared at the glass of water held by her fair fingers for a while before taking it from her with trembling fingers. "No, I fell asleep. I took a nap on the sofa for a while." Lin Jiayi knew that he was lying, but she didn't expose him. Instead, she craned her neck to peer into the kitchen and asked, "What did you make for breakfast? I'm starting to feel a little hungry." "Oh, I'll get it for you now," Xie Shangzhou said as he put down the glass and went into the kitchen. Soon, a sumptuous breakfast was placed on the dining table. Lin Jiayi picked up 2 sets of bowls and chopsticks, and after scooping the first bowl of porridge, she placed it on the opposite side of her seat. While scooping the second bowl of porridge, she glanced at Xie Shangzhou and said, "I won't be able to finish all of this by myself. It just so happens that you haven't had breakfast yet, so why don't we eat together?" As she spoke, Lin Jiayi put down her bowl of porridge and stirred it with a spoon. As if she was craving for it, she stuffed a mouthful of porridge into her mouth. Then, when she saw that Xie Shangzhou hadn't taken a seat yet, she urged him, "Navigator, what are you standing there for? Hurry up and take a seat," Xie Shangzhou replied with an "oh" before finally taking a seat. Lin Jia passed a pancake to Xie Shangzhou before asking, I heard from the ATM that you're starting your own business. Xie Shangzhou nodded. Chapter 1058. But starting a business isn't easy. If there's anything you need help with, feel free to look for me. Fearing that Xie Shangzhou would feel embarrassed, Lin Jia added, you don't have to stand on ceremony with me. No matter what, you've worked for me for so many years, so it's only right for me to take care of you. Xie Shangzhou replied with an before asking the question that had been on his mind ever since he saw her last night. What about you, Boss Lin? How have you been recently? It's been pretty much the same. Lin Jia paused for a moment before continuing, I've been pretty busy. I really want to go on a vacation, but I haven't had the chance to do so. There's no end to the money, so health is the most important thing. Recalling that Lin Jia had suffered from menstrual cramps last night, Xie Shangzhou thought about how he would have to attend to his own affairs after breakfast, and who knew when they would be able to meet again. He tightened his grip around his chopsticks, and after taking 2 mouthfuls of porridge, he raised his head and called out once more, Boss Lin. Lin Jia replied with a lowered eyelid as she continued peeling eggs. Xie Shangzhou stared at her for a moment before moving his lips. Boss Lin, you might think that I'm annoying, but you really have to pay attention to your health. This is especially so considering that your tummy hurts every month, so you can't treat it as a serious matter. I bought some brown sugar for you, and it's in that drawer. Remember to drink a glass of brown sugar water on certain days every month. Also, prepare a blanket in the car. Don't ignore the temperature for the sake of elegance. Also, I've changed the medicine in your medical kit. They're all the latest from the factory, and there's a shelf life for them. I've also stuck a note on your fever medicine, flu medicine, and anti-inflammatory medicine, and I've also noted down how many pills you take. I've also stuffed the food in the fridge full of food for you. Even if you don't know how to cook, you should at least prepare some fast food. It's better than starving. Amidst Xie Shangzhou's nagging, Lin Jia finally stopped peeling the eggs. Her head was still lowered, and her expression didn't seem to change, but there was a hint of warmth in her eyes. Also, I wrote down the recipe for your favorite porridge and stuck it on the fridge. If you can't learn it, you can ask Auntie to learn it. It's very simple. Auntie can put it in the rice cooker at a fixed time so that you can drink it when you wake up the next day. You must eat breakfast, otherwise, it's not good for your stomach. Unable to take it any longer, Lin Jia interjected, Navigator, I'm afraid that I won't be able to remember so much at once. Xie Shangzhou fell silent. Although he really wanted to be at her beck and call, he couldn't be at her beck and call forever. After all, she had someone she loved. After a while, Xie Shangzhou said, Then I'll take a pen and write everything down for you. With that, Xie Shangzhou stood up and walked over to the counter. He picked up the pen and paper he had just tossed there, returned to the dining table, and started writing stroke by stroke. Lin Jia didn't say a word. Instead, she sat down across from him and watched as the words appeared one by one on the note. As she watched, her eyes reddened. She subconsciously turned her head to look out the window. She tried her best to calm her emotions down, but no matter how hard she tried, she was unable to do so. She pursed her lips, and when she turned back to look at him again, she saw that he had already written 4 notes on the note. Her brain couldn't help but move her lips. Chapter 1059. She tried her best to calm herself down, but no matter how hard she tried, she was unable to do so. She pursed her lips, and when she turned around to look at him once more, she saw that he had already written on 4 pieces of paper. Her brain couldn't help but move her lips. Guide, but before she could say a single word, the doorbell rang. Xie Shangzhou's writing paused for a moment before he put down his brush and prepared to stand up. I'll go open the door. Lin Jia swallowed the words she was about to say and said, I'll go. After saying those words, she stood up and walked toward the door. Seeing that Lin Jia had gone to open the door, Xie Shangzhou picked up his brush and continued writing on the paper. Not too long later, the door to the living room opened, and a male voice sounded, Good morning. Even though it was just 2 words, Xie Shangzhou could still tell that the person who had come was Enchanting. Enchanting was Lin Jia's boyfriend, and he had nothing to do with Lin Jia at the moment. If Enchanting were to see him at Lin Jia's house in the morning, would it cause any trouble for Lin Jia? Xie Shangzhou tightened his grip on the brush a little, and without much thought, he tucked the paper into his pocket. After which, he quickly got up and moved the pots and pans on the dining table into the kitchen. Why are you here? Why didn't you give me a call in advance? I have an appointment with Mr. Chen of Chenyang Group for breakfast today, and it happens to be near your company. I thought that you might not have had breakfast yet, so I came over to pick you up and have breakfast together. All the more reason for you to give me a call in advance then. I just had breakfast. By the time Lin Jia finished her words, Enchanting and Lin Jia had already reached the entrance of the dining room. At the same time, Xie Shangzhou also returned from the kitchen and sat back down on his chair. Enchanting was just about to reply to Lin Jia, but when he saw Xie Shangzhou sitting in the dining room, he froze for a moment before asking, Why are you here, Mr. Xia? I see. Lin Jia nodded. Just as she was about to continue speaking, Xie Shangzhou instinctively spoke up, Mr. Qin, it's like this. I lost an important document a while ago, and I was unable to find it. 2 days ago, Boss Lin told me that she found it at her place, and it just so happened that I was going to use it today, so I rushed over to retrieve it. I see. Enchanting glanced at the clean dining table before turning to Lin Jia and asking, Jia, have you really eaten breakfast? Fearing that Lin Jia would let the cat out of the bag, Xie Shangzhou quickly added, I've already eaten. On my way here, Boss Lin said that she was hungry, so she asked me to bring some food for her. Instead of looking at Xie Shangzhou, Enchanting's gaze remained fixed on Lin Jia's face. He seemed to believe Xie Shangzhou's words, and he didn't pursue the matter any further. Instead, he asked, Jia, are you going to work now? If you're going, I can send you off. Lin Jia stared at Xie Shangzhou intently. Enchanting couldn't possibly know the truth, but she knew that Xie Shangzhou's words were all lies. Was he afraid that Enchanting would misunderstand that there was something going on between the two of them, so he cleaned the dining table so cleanly that he didn't leave any trace that he had stayed here for too long. Noticing that Lin Jia wasn't saying a word, Enchanting spoke up once more with a gentle voice, Jia. Chapter 1060. Hearing Lin Jia's words, Xie Shangzhou immediately followed up, then, Boss Lin, I'll head to the study to get the documents I want and leave right away. I won't be saying goodbye to you then, the navigator sure is something, to be able to forge it so realistically. Lin Jia had no idea what was going on with her, but she couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. Ignoring Xie Shangzhou, she turned around and headed to the bedroom. As if nothing had happened, Xie Shangzhou turned to Enchanting with a smile and said, Mr. Qin, I'll be taking my leave then. After which, he entered the study and walked out with an empty paper bag. Lin Jia was still changing her clothes, and Enchanting was already seated on the sofa in the living room. Before Xie Shangzhou left, he pondered for a moment before bidding farewell to Enchanting. Hearing his voice, Enchanting raised his head and glanced at Xie Shangzhou. After a moment of contemplation, he stood up and said, Allow me to send you off, Mr. Xia. There's no need for that, Mr. Qin, Xie Shangzhou replied politely. However, Enchanting still walked over to him and personally sent him to the door. He even helped him press the elevator. While waiting for the elevator, Ting looked at Xie Shangzhou for a moment before asking warmly, Mr. Xia, will you be free soon? When the time comes, you must attend my wedding with Jie. Wedding? Xie Shangzhou's fingers subconsciously tightened around the empty paper bag in his hand. Wedding? Are you two planning to get married? Of course. Didn't Jie tell you? I proposed to her last month. Didn't you see her diamond ring? Oh, that's right. She probably didn't wear it because she just woke up. So, in the 70 days that he had been away from her, they had already progressed to the status of an engaged couple. Well, she liked him so much and had liked him for so many years. He had seen that kind of love and persistence. Now that they had finally met again, they were together, and they were going to get married and have children. Naturally, it was only natural, with such thoughts in mind, Xie Shangzhou's lips moved once more. His voice was no different from usual, but he knew very well just how stiff his lips were when he spoke. Congratulations then. After a pause, Xie Shangzhou asked with difficulty, when do you plan to hold the wedding? I haven't confirmed the date yet, but I'm sure Jie will inform you once it's confirmed. Even if Jie doesn't inform you, I'll remind her to inform you as well. When the time comes, Mr. Xia, don't come up with any excuses to refuse to attend the wedding. Ting said half-jokingly. Mr. Qin, you really know how to joke. I'm definitely here to send my blessings to President Lin's wedding. Ting smiled and did not say anything else. The elevator arrived at Lin Jie's floor. When the elevator doors opened, Xie Shangzhou glanced at the half-closed door behind him, then glanced at the smiling Ting. He thought for a moment, then said, even though you haven't set a date for your wedding, I still want to say one more thing. Mr. Qin. I wish the two of you a happy and blissful marriage. Also, you must treat her well. Xie Shangzhou's throat felt like it was being choked by something, and he could no longer make a sound. Without waiting for Ting to respond, he turned around and entered the elevator. When the elevator doors closed and slowly descended, he continued to think about what he had just said. Chapter 1061. It was only when the elevator finally reached the first floor that Ting turned around and returned to Lin Jie's apartment. A second after he closed the door to the bedroom opened, and a neatly dressed Lin Jie walked out with the latest bag in her hand. Mr. Xia has left. I just sent him off, Lin Jie replied with an indifferent "oh" before opening the shoe cabinet. She took out a few pairs of high heels and tried them on in front of the mirror. Finally, Lin Jie chose a pair of high heels that matched the color of her sweater. After which, she grabbed her car keys and pushed open the door. Ting followed Lin Jie out. While waiting for the elevator, Ting kept glancing at Lin Jie. In the end, he couldn't help but ask the question that had been on his mind all this while, Jie, do you not like the ring that I gave you? His words were tactful, but Lin Jie understood what he meant. Is he asking me if I've made up my mind about my proposal? Lin Jie didn't respond to Ting's question, but the image of Xie Shangzhou standing in the kitchen, preparing breakfast flashed across her mind. She was already a little hesitant when he proposed to her, but after the meeting with the navigator last night, she felt as if she had been possessed. She couldn't help but feel the urge to apologize to him and return the ring to him. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jie turned to look at Ting. His eyes, his facial features, his lips. They were all the same as in her memory, the same face that she had once loved dearly. But why was it that she couldn't find the feeling she had at the beginning after loving him for so long? Just what was wrong with her? Was it her problem, or was it him? Seeing Lin Jie staring at him silently, Chuan couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He had thought that everything would go smoothly with his plan, but for some reason, right after he confidently proposed to her, a problem suddenly occurred. He had promised many people that Lin Enterprise would cooperate with them. In fact, he had even promised some people that he would do it this month. The reason why he was so certain was because he felt that she would agree to his proposal. When that time came, as long as he became her fiancé, he could casually greet many of the people in charge of Lin Enterprise and facilitate those collaborations. After all, those people had all given him benefits. Now that he had received the benefits, there was no way for him to proceed with the matter. He was very anxious, but he didn't dare to rush her too much for fear of revealing any flaws. Enchanting tried her best to maintain the composure on her face as she turned to Lin Jai and said, "It's fine, I'm just asking. We won't be together for long anyway, so let's just take it slow." Hearing Enchanting's words, Lin Jai heaved a sigh of relief inwardly. When did she start to feel uncomfortable, tired, and stressed out when she was with Enchanting? She suddenly missed the time when she chatted with the GPS during breakfast in the morning. She could say whatever she wanted, and she could also show her sloppiest and most casual side in front of him. "Jai? What are you waiting for? Get in the car." Chapter 1062. On the way to the Lin Corporation, Enchanting and Lin Jai chatted idly with one another. Enchanting asked about the hobbies and situations of the bosses in Beijing. When they were about to reach Lin Enterprise, Lin Jai suddenly understood why she was getting more and more tired of interacting with Enchanting. In the beginning, Enchanting was fine with her, but later, she didn't know when it started. Enchanting's conversations with her all turned to business topics. She was already tired of dealing with work at the company. It wasn't easy for them to meet and have a meal together in private, but he still had to think about business. Over time, she felt that Enchanting wasn't like her boyfriend, but more like a business partner. Faced with Enchanting's question, Lin Jai rubbed her temples. She was just about to reply with a, "I don't know," when Enchanting's phone rang. She subconsciously glanced at the screen of his phone, and it was a series of phone numbers. Enchanting probably didn't know who it was, so he answered the call politely. "Hello, may I know who you are?" Enchanting. It was a female voice on the other end of the phone. Her voice was agitated, and there was even a hint of hatred in it. Lin Jai frowned slightly as she turned to look at Enchanting. Enchanting replied calmly, "I'm sorry, but I really don't know where your boyfriend is. Please stop harassing me." Before the person on the other end of the phone could respond, he hung up the phone. After hanging up the call, Enchanting turned to Lin Jai and said, "She's the girlfriend of a friend of mine. That friend of mine got her pregnant, and she disappeared after that. Ever since then, this woman has been pestering me, asking for all sorts of information on that friend of mine, but I really have no idea where that friend of mine has gone. Besides, I don't want to get involved in the affairs of a couple. Who knows, I might just end up getting myself into trouble." After listening to Enchanting's description, Lin Jai replied with an "Oh." Just as she was about to add, "Your friend is also quite a scumbag," Enchanting's phone rang again. It was from the same number. This time, Enchanting didn't pick up the call. Half a minute later, the call continued. A slight frown appeared on Lin Jai's forehead. "Why don't you answer the call and talk to her?" "It's not that I don't want to talk to her, but I really can't. I've explained to her countless times that I really don't know where her boyfriend went, but she just doesn't believe me. There's nothing I can do. Plus, she's pregnant. I'm really afraid that if I agitate her and something happens, I'll have to take responsibility." Lin Jai pondered for a moment, and she agreed that Enchanting's words made sense, so she replied with a, "That's true." A second later, Enchanting's phone screen lit up. This time, it was a message from the same number. "Enchanting, you bastard, don't even think about it." Before Lin Jai could read the rest of the message, Enchanting had already turned her phone screen black. She's always like this, scolding me for no reason. Nodding her head, Lin Jiayi replied with an okay, before turning her gaze to the window. If what Qin Ting said was true, the woman should be scolding her scumbag boyfriend. Why was she scolding Qin Ting? Also, don't even think about what happened after that. What made Qin Ting lock the screen in such a panic? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.